What happens when the woman who built an empire from nothing wakes up to find her name splashed across every headline as a thief? When the numbers don't lie, but the truth isn't what it seems. Aria Bennett had everything until someone decided to take it all away. This is the story of a CEO fighting for her life, a single father risking everything for the truth, and a conspiracy that nearly destroyed them both. If you want to see how far someone will go when the world turns against them, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. The first crack appeared at 6:47 a.m. Aria Bennett was 3 sips into her coffee when her phone started vibrating across the marble countertop. Not the polite buzz of a text message or the controlled rhythm of a scheduled call. This was chaos, notification after notification, the screen lighting up like a slot machine hitting jackpot. She set down her mug and reached for it, her stomach already tightening with that pre-disaster instinct successful people develop after years of crisis management. Financial Times, Bennett Industries. CEO, under investigation for fraud. Wall Street Journal, $400 million missing from Bennett Industries accounts. Bloomberg sources say Bennett may have orchestrated elaborate scheme. The coffee turned to acid in her mouth. Her hands were steady as she unlocked the phone. 30 years of executive training didn't evaporate in 30 seconds, but her mind was racing. She scrolled through the headlines, each one worse than the last. They all said the same thing in different words. Aria Bennett, the woman who'd built a billion-dollar consulting firm from a laptop and a dream, had allegedly stolen hundreds of millions from her own company. The word allegedly felt like a formality no one actually believed. She was still staring at the screen when her phone rang. Richard Carmichael, chairman of the board. Of course. Richard, I'm seeing the news. Emergency board meeting, 1 hour, conference room A. His voice was clipped, professional, and completely devoid of the warmth he'd shown at last month's gala when he'd toasted her vision and leadership. I trust you'll have an explanation. I don't even know what I'm being accused of. I need to see— 1 hour, Aria. The line went dead. She stood in her kitchen, surrounded by the trappings of success she'd worked herself raw to achieve. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Custom Italian cabinetry, a sub-zero refrigerator she barely had time to stock. Everything gleaming and perfect and utterly meaningless. Her second call was to Martin Price, her CFO, and the man who'd been with her since the company was just the two of them in a shared office space. Martin, what the hell is happening? Silence. Long enough that she pulled the phone away from her ear to check if the call had dropped. Martin? I'm here. His voice sounded hollow. Aria, the auditors found there are transactions, dozens of them, money moving through shell companies, offshore accounts. Your signature is on everything. That's impossible. The board brought in external investigators 3 weeks ago. They didn't tell you because— He stopped. Because I'm the suspect. The word tasted foreign in her mouth. The evidence is— It's damning. I'm looking at it right now, and I don't know how to explain it. These are your authorized transfers, your login credentials, your signature on every document. Aria's mind was already working through the possibilities, discarding the impossible, grasping for logical explanations. Someone's setting me up. That's what I want to believe. Martin's voice cracked slightly. But Aria, they have everything. Transaction records, email trails, even voice confirmations from the bank. It's not just 1 or 2 questionable transfers. It's a pattern spanning 18 months. I didn't do this. I know. But he didn't sound certain. He sounded tired. The board wants your resignation before the market opens. They're trying to contain this before the stock price crashes completely. I'm not resigning. I built this company. I'm not walking away because someone doctored some paperwork. The paperwork isn't doctored. That's the problem. Everything checks out. Every security protocol was followed. Every authentication passed. Whoever did this didn't hack the system, Aria. They knew exactly how to work within it. The implication hung between them like smoke. An inside job. Someone with intimate knowledge of Bennett Industries' financial systems. Someone with access to her credentials, her patterns, her daily routines. Someone close. I'll be at the meeting, she said, and I'm bringing my lawyer. Good, you're going to need one. The board meeting was an execution dressed up as due process. Arya walked into the conference room exactly on time, her lawyer Patricia Chen beside her. The 12 board members were already seated, their faces arranged in varying expressions of disappointment, anger, and worst of all, pity. Richard sat at the head of the table, his fingers steepled in front of him like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. "Thank you for coming, Arya." His formality was a slap. They'd known each other for 8 years. She'd been a guest at his daughter's wedding. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Richard. What exactly am I being accused of?" The company's general counsel, David Warren, slid a thick folder across the table. "These are the preliminary findings from the investigation. Beginning in March of last year, approximately $423 million was systematically transferred from Bennett Industries' operating accounts into a network of shell corporations registered in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and Singapore." Arya opened the folder. The first page was a transaction record with her electronic signature at the bottom. "I didn't authorize this." "Your credentials were used for every single transfer," David continued. "The authentication logs show the requests originated from your office IP address during business hours using your personal login and your biometric confirmation. Then someone replicated my credentials." "The biometric authentication requires your physical thumbprint, Arya." Richard's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "The system was designed specifically to prevent the kind of fraud you're describing." Patricia leaned forward. "My client maintains her innocence. If there's been unauthorized access to her accounts, that's a security failure on the company's part, not evidence of wrongdoing." "We've had 3 independent cybersecurity firms examine the system," David said. "No evidence of external breach, no signs of credential theft. Every security checkpoint was passed using legitimate authentication." Arya forced herself to read through the documents, even though her hands wanted to shake. Each page was another nail in a coffin she hadn't known was being built. Transaction after transaction, all bearing her digital fingerprints. Emails she didn't remember writing, approving transfers to companies she'd never heard of. It was meticulous, careful, perfectly constructed. "This is a setup," she said quietly. "Everything you're showing me is fabricated." "By whom?" Richard's question wasn't rhetorical. "Who could possibly have this level of access to your accounts, your biometrics, your daily schedule?" That was the question, wasn't it? The one that made her stomach turn. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." "We don't have time for you to play detective." This from Sandra Yoshida, who joined the board 6 months ago on the strength of her reputation for corporate oversight. "The SEC is already involved. The FBI will be next. Every hour you remain a CEO is another hour this company's reputation burns." "I'm not resigning." "Then we'll vote to remove you." Richard looked genuinely pained. "Arya, please. Don't make this harder than it already is. Step down voluntarily, cooperate with the investigation, and maybe we can find a way through this that doesn't end with criminal charges." "I didn't steal from my own company." "Then prove it." Sandra's voice was sharp. "Because right now, all the evidence says otherwise." The vote was 11-1. Only Martin abstained, and even that felt like a betrayal wrapped in cowardice. By noon, Arya Bennett was no longer CEO of the company she'd founded. By 1 p.m., the news had gone viral. By 3 p.m., she was trending on social media as the latest example of executive corruption. By evening, protesters had gathered outside her building with signs calling her a thief. She sat in her apartment, the one she'd bought with money she'd actually earned through deals she'd actually closed, and watched her life disintegrate in real time. The news stations ran her biography like an obituary. Once seen as a trailblazer for women in business, Arya Bennett now faces allegations that could land her in prison for decades. Her phone had been ringing nonstop until she finally turned it off. Friends who suddenly didn't answer, business partners who couldn't be reached. Even her mother had called, her voice tight with barely suppressed hysteria, asking if it was true. "Of course it's not true," Arya had snapped. "Then why does everyone think it is?" That was the question that mattered, wasn't it? Not whether she'd done it, she knew she hadn't, but why the evidence was so perfect, why every trail led back to her, why someone had spent 18 months carefully, systematically destroying her. Patricia had left 2 hours ago with a warning. "They're going to arrest you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it's coming. The DA won't be able to ignore this kind of pressure. When they do, we need to be ready. Ready how? With answers, with evidence, with something that proves you didn't do this. Patricia had looked at her with the kind of frank assessment lawyers reserve for clients they're not sure they believe. Right now, we have nothing. You need to find something, Arya. Fast. So now she sat in her living room, laptop open, going through 18 months of her own financial records looking for what? Proof that she hadn't stolen from herself? The absence of evidence felt like drowning. Her doorbell rang at 8:47 p.m. She almost didn't answer. The press had been camped outside since afternoon, but the intercom showed a single man, mid-30s, wearing jeans and a jacket that had seen better days, holding a messenger bag and looking vaguely uncomfortable. "Ms. Bennett? My name is Noah Hayes. I'm a forensic accountant. I think I can help you." She should have closed the intercom, should have called security, should have done any number of sensible things that didn't involve letting a stranger into her home when the entire world thought she was a criminal. Instead, she buzzed him up. Noah Hayes looked nothing like the kind of help she'd expected. He was tall, but carried himself like someone trying not to take up too much space. His dark hair needed a cut, there was a coffee stain on his shirt collar, and he had the slightly rumpled appearance of a man who'd gotten dressed in a hurry. "I have 5 minutes," Arya said as she opened the door. "Make it count." "I've been following your case. I think you're innocent." "Great, you and nobody else." He stepped inside, his eyes already scanning the apartment with the quick assessment of someone trained to notice details. "The evidence against you is too clean. I've worked fraud cases for 8 years, and I've never seen a real embezzlement look this perfect. Real criminals make mistakes. They leave gaps. They get sloppy." "Maybe I'm just really good at being a criminal." The sarcasm was reflexive, a defense mechanism. "You're not." He set his bag down on her coffee table and pulled out a laptop. "Real white-collar criminals have a pattern. They start small, test the system, then escalate. You allegedly went from $0 to $423 million in one scheme. That's not how it works. Tell that to the board. The board is looking at the evidence they were given. They're not looking at what's missing." He opened his laptop and turned it toward her. "I spent the afternoon pulling public financial data on Bennett Industries. Your company's revenue patterns, your quarterly reports, your market position. If you'd been stealing for 18 months, there would be operational impacts, budget shortfalls, unexplained gaps, projects that didn't get funded." Arya looked at the screen. He'd built a detailed analysis of her company's financial health over the past 2 years. "Everything runs smoothly," Noah continued, "almost too smoothly. Like someone made sure to replace every dollar they stole so the operations wouldn't show stress. That takes planning, sophistication, access to capital. So you're saying someone stole $400 million and then put it back? Not put it back. Covered the holes in real time so no one would notice the money was missing until they wanted you to notice." He looked at her directly for the first time, and she was struck by how focused his gaze was. "This isn't about stealing money. This is about destroying you." The words hit harder than they should have because they confirmed what she'd been thinking but hadn't wanted to voice. Why would anyone go to that much trouble? That's what we need to find out. He closed the laptop. "But we don't have much time. Once the FBI gets involved, they'll lock down your company's servers. Any evidence that might prove your innocence will be buried under federal security protocols." "So what do you want from me?" "Access to your internal financial systems. Complete transparency. Every password, every account, every record." He paused. "And trust. You're going to have to trust me, which I know is asking a lot from someone who just got betrayed by everyone she knows." Arya studied him. He was nervous. She could see it in the way his hand kept moving toward his messenger bag, like he needed something to hold on to. But there was also competence there, intelligence, and something else she couldn't quite name. Desperation, maybe. The same thing she was feeling. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "I can't pay you. My assets are frozen, and even if they weren't, taking me on as a client is career suicide." Noah's expression shifted, something vulnerable crossing his face before he locked it down. "Let's just say I know what it's like when everyone thinks the worst of you. And I know what it's like to need someone to believe you when you're telling the truth." There was a story there, but Arya didn't press. She didn't have the luxury of vetting her allies anymore. "Okay," she said, "but if we're doing this, you need to understand what you're walking into. Someone powerful enough to fake 18 months of financial records, bypass every security system, and turn my entire board against me doesn't want to be found. If they realize we're investigating, they'll come after you too. I have a 5-year-old son. Noah said it simply, stating a fact. I've already thought about the risk. I've made arrangements. Arrangements? My ex-wife has temporary custody. If something happens to me, Jake will be safe. The casual way he said it, the acknowledgement that something might happen, sent a chill down Arya's spine. You're really serious about this? I don't take cases I don't believe in, and I believe in this one. He pulled a flash drive from his bag. I need you to download your complete email archive, all your calendar data for the past 2 years, and any personal financial records you keep. Everything. Even things you think are irrelevant. That'll take hours. I'll wait. So she did it. Sat at her dining table with her laptop while Noah worked silently across from her, his fingers moving across his keyboard with the kind of focused intensity she recognized from her own work marathons. Occasionally he'd mutter something under his breath, a question or observation directed at himself. Around midnight he looked up. These shell companies, the ones the money was allegedly transferred to, do any of these names mean anything to you? He showed her a list. Meridian Holdings, LLC, Cascade Financial Group, Titanium Investment Partners, Phoenix Asset Management. Arya scanned them, her exhausted brain trying to make connections. Phoenix Asset Management. I think that might have been one of our vendors, years ago, when we were smaller. What kind of vendor? IT consulting, maybe. Or security? She rubbed her eyes. I'd have to check the old contracts. Do that. First thing tomorrow. Noah made a note. If someone used a real vendor as cover, that's sloppy. That's the kind of mistake we can use. You really think we can prove I didn't do this? He looked at her, and for the first time since this nightmare started, someone looked at her with something other than suspicion or pity. I think whoever framed you made this too perfect. And perfect is just another word for fragile. We find one crack, the whole thing falls apart. And if we don't find a crack, then we make one. It was almost 2 a.m. when Noah finally packed up his laptop. Arya walked him to the door, feeling the weight of exhaustion and adrenaline in equal measure. Get some sleep, he said. Tomorrow we start digging into your company's vendor history. I'll need access to your office. I don't have office access anymore. They revoked my credentials. Do you have anyone on the inside who might help? She thought of Martin, who'd abstained from the vote but hadn't defended her either. Maybe. I'll make some calls. Noah nodded and turned to leave, then stopped. Ms. Bennett, one more thing. From now on, assume everything you do is being watched. Your phone, your email, your apartment. Whoever set this up has been tracking your movements for over a year. They know your patterns better than you do. That's a terrifying thought. It should be. But it also means they'll be watching for your response. They'll expect you to lawyer up, make public statements, maybe try to flee. They won't expect you to investigate. You think that gives us an advantage? I think it gives us a chance, which is more than you had this morning. After he left, Arya stood in her apartment and looked out at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere in this city was the person who'd done this to her. Someone who knew her routines, her security protocols, her biometrics. Someone with patience and resources and a reason to want her destroyed. Tomorrow the FBI would probably show up with questions. Tomorrow the press would dig deeper into her past looking for anything scandalous. Tomorrow her company would begin the process of erasing her from its history. But tonight, for the first time since seeing those headlines, Arya Bennett felt something other than helpless rage. She felt like she was fighting back. Her phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on to download her data. A text from an unknown number. You should have taken the resignation offer. Now this gets worse. Her hands were shaking as she screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Noah. His response came within seconds. Don't reply. Forward me anything else you receive. And Arya? This confirms what we already knew. Someone's still watching, which means we're on the right track. She set down her phone and walked to her window. The protesters were gone now, but she knew they'd be back tomorrow. And the next day. And the day after that, until either she proved her innocence or accepted her guilt. Arya had built her career on impossible challenges, on taking companies that were failing and finding the hidden inefficiencies, the overlooked opportunities, the solutions everyone else had missed. She'd made her fortune by seeing what others couldn't. Now she was the problem that needed solving, and she'd just hired the one person who seemed to believe she could be saved. 3 days later, Arya met Noah in a coffee shop 10 blocks from her apartment. She'd taken the train, doubled back twice, and walked the last mile to make sure she wasn't followed. Noah's instructions had been specific: assume surveillance, act accordingly. He was already there when she arrived, sitting in a back corner with his laptop and what looked like 3 days' worth of coffee cups. "You look terrible," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Haven't been home much." He pushed a folder toward her. "But I found something." Arya opened it. Inside were printouts of financial records, highlighted in yellow and pink and green like a fever dream of accounting. "Phoenix Asset Management wasn't just a vendor," Noah said, keeping his voice low. "They were your IT security contractor from 2019 to 2021. They had system-level access to your entire network, including your biometric authentication protocols." Arya's pulse quickened. "So they could have replicated my credentials. More than that, they built the system that validates your credentials. They had the architecture schematics, the source code, everything." He pulled out another document. "I pulled their business registration." Phoenix Asset Management was dissolved in June 2021, right after their contract with you ended. But before they dissolved, they transferred all their assets to a holding company called Titanium Investment Partners. That's one of the shell companies the money was transferred to. Exactly. Which means whoever set this up didn't just know your security systems. They designed them. Arya felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "Who owned Phoenix Asset Management?" Noah's expression went grim. "That's where it gets complicated. The registration lists a CEO named Marcus Thornton, but when I tried to research him, I hit a wall. No social media, no professional history before 2019, no tax records. Marcus Thornton doesn't exist. A fake identity, or a real person using someone else's credentials." He leaned back. "But here's the interesting part. Phoenix Asset Management's original pitch to your company was personally endorsed by someone on your executive team, someone who vouched for their credibility and recommended them for the contract." "Who?" Noah slid one more document across the table. It was an email from March 2019 enthusiastically recommending Phoenix Asset Management for Bennett Industries' security overhaul. The sender: Martin Price, CFO. Arya stared at the email, her mind racing through possibilities and rejecting most of them. Martin had been with her from the beginning. He'd worked 18-hour days to help build the company. He'd been her friend, her confidant, her most trusted advisor. "This doesn't prove Martin's involved," she said, but her voice sounded uncertain even to herself. "It doesn't prove he's not." Noah's tone was gentle but firm. "Arya, think about what this setup required. Intimate knowledge of your schedule, your habits, your decision-making patterns. Access to create and maintain a parallel financial structure for 18 months without detection. The ability to anticipate security audits and cover tracks in real time. Martin wouldn't do this to me." "Maybe not, but someone with his access and knowledge could." Noah closed his laptop. "We need to investigate him. Carefully. Without him knowing." "How? Does he have an assistant? Someone who might have access to his calendar, his files?" "Rebecca. She's been with him for 3 years." "Would she talk to you?" Arya thought about it. Rebecca Chen, no relation to her lawyer Patricia, was efficient, discreet, and had always been friendly in that professional way that didn't encourage familiarity. "I don't know, maybe." "Then that's our next move." Noah started packing up his laptop. "But Arya, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that the person who did this is someone you trusted, someone close." She didn't want to believe it, couldn't believe it, really, but the evidence was pointing in a direction she couldn't ignore. "If it is Martin," she said slowly, "why? What would he gain from destroying the company we built together?" "That's what we need to find out. But in my experience, there are only 3 motives for this kind of betrayal: money, revenge, or protection." Noah met her eyes. "Figure out which one applies and we'll find our answer." They left separately. Noah first, then Arya 10 minutes later. She took a different route back to her apartment, her mind churning through scenarios. Martin, who'd celebrated with her when they landed their first major client. Martin, who'd been the best man at her wedding and the first person she'd called when her marriage fell apart. Martin, who'd stood silently while the board voted to remove her. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Stop digging. This is your only warning. She forwarded it to Noah and kept walking. That night, Arya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the past 18 months, trying to remember anything unusual in Martin's behavior. Any late nights, any stress, any sign that he was living a double life. But there was nothing. He'd been the same steady, reliable Martin he'd always been, which meant either he was innocent or he was a better actor than she'd ever imagined. At 3 a.m., her phone rang. Noah. "Did I wake you?" he asked. "I wasn't sleeping." "Good, because I found something else." Marcus Thornton, the fake identity that owned Phoenix Asset Management, used to have a LinkedIn profile. It was deleted in 2021, but the internet remembers everything. She heard typing. The profile picture was stock photography, but the work history listed a previous employer, Carmichael Venture Capital. Arya sat up straight. "Richard Carmichael? The same Richard Carmichael who chairs your board. The same Richard Carmichael who led the vote to remove you." Noah's voice was tight with controlled excitement. "I don't believe in coincidences this big." "Neither do I." Arya's mind was already working through the implications. Richard brought Martin into the company. He recommended him when we were first expanding. So we have Richard connected to Martin, both connected to Phoenix Asset Management, and all of it leading back to the fraud. Noah paused. "Arya, I think this goes deeper than we thought. This isn't just about stealing money. This is about taking over your company. But Richard's already wealthy. He doesn't need my company. Maybe it's not about money. Maybe it's about control. Or maybe there's something about Bennett Industries that we don't know. Something worth $423 million and 18 months of planning." Arya got out of bed and walked to her window. The city looked peaceful at this hour, lights twinkling like everything was normal. "What do we do now?" "We get evidence. Real evidence, not just connections. We need financial records, communications, something that directly links Richard or Martin to the shell companies." Noah sounded tired but determined. "I'm going to keep digging into Phoenix Asset Management's financial history. You need to get access to Martin's files somehow. His assistant Rebecca might help. I'll reach out tomorrow. Be careful. If Martin is involved, he'll be watching for you to make contact with anyone from the company." "I'm always careful." "No, you're always confident. There's a difference." Noah's voice softened slightly. "Arya, these people, whoever they are, they've already destroyed your reputation and stolen your company. If they think you're getting close to exposing them, they won't stop at threats." "I know." "Do you?" "Because I have a son who needs his father, and you have a life that's worth more than revenge." "This isn't about revenge. This is about the truth." "Sometimes the truth gets people killed." The line went quiet for a moment, both of them sitting with that reality. "I'm not backing down," Arya said finally, "but I appreciate the concern. Just watch your back. And Arya, don't trust anyone, not completely, not until we know exactly who's behind this." "Not even you?" Noah laughed, but it sounded strained. "Especially not me. I'm a stranger who showed up at your door with a convenient story. For all you know, I'm part of this." "Are you?" "No, but you shouldn't take my word for it." After they hung up, Arya stood at her window for a long time, thinking about trust and betrayal and how thin the line was between the two. Somewhere in this city, someone was sleeping soundly, confident that their plan had worked, that Arya Bennett was defeated, discredited, and destroyed. They were wrong. The next morning, Arya called Rebecca Chen from a burner phone Noah had given her. "Rebecca, it's Arya Bennett. I need to talk to you. Not about business, about Martin." There was a long pause. "Ms. Bennett, I don't think I should be talking to you. Mr. Price said, I know what Martin said. I'm asking you to make your own decision." Arya kept her voice calm, professional. "I'm not guilty of what they're accusing me of, and I think Martin knows that. I think he might even know who's really behind this. But I need your help to prove it. I could lose my job." "You could. But if Martin's involved in framing me, do you really want to keep working for him?" Another pause, longer this time. "What do you need?" "Access to his calendar for the past 2 years. Any files labeled Phoenix Asset Management or anything related to security contracts from 2019 to 2021, and any communication between Martin and Richard Carmichael that isn't about board business. That's a lot, and most of it's probably protected. Can you get it? Rebecca sighed. Meet me tomorrow. Millennium Park, noon, the Bean. Don't be late, and don't tell anyone you talked to me. Thank you, Rebecca. Don't thank me yet. And Ms. Bennett, if you're wrong about Mr. Price, if he's innocent and I'm helping you invade his privacy, I'll never forgive you. If I'm wrong, I'll never forgive myself. The call ended. Arya sat on her couch, staring at the burner phone, wondering if she was about to ruin another person's life in her quest to save her own. But she couldn't stop now, not when she was this close to answers. Noah called an hour later. I found the money. What? The $423 million. I found where it went. He sounded breathless, like he'd been running. It didn't stay in those shell companies. It was transferred again, broken up into smaller amounts, and dispersed through a network of overseas accounts. But I traced the final destination. Where? Back into Bennett Industries. Arya felt like she'd been punched. What are you talking about? The money was stolen, laundered through the shell companies, and then reinvested back into your company through what looks like legitimate venture capital funding. Someone stole your company's money and then used it to buy more shares of your company. That's insane. It's brilliant. They take the money, wash it clean, and use it to increase their ownership stake. From the outside, it looks like fresh investment. From the inside, it's corporate cannibalism. Noah's voice was tight with anger. Arya, someone's trying to take over Bennett Industries by bankrupting it with its own money. Richard, the name came out as a whisper. He's been advocating for months to bring in outside investment, to dilute my controlling stake. And now he has the ammunition to do it. Your company is in crisis, the stock price is falling, the board is panicking. If he comes in with a white knight investment offer, they'll take it. And once he controls enough shares, he can do whatever he wants with Bennett Industries. Arya felt the pieces clicking into place. This was never about stealing money. It was about stealing my company and destroying you in the process so you couldn't fight back. Noah paused. We need to go public with this. Contact the SEC, the FBI. Show them what we found. We don't have proof. We have theories and connections, but nothing that would stand up in court. Then we get proof. Tomorrow when you meet Rebecca, get everything you can. I'll keep tracing the money trail. We find one document, one email, one transaction that directly links Richard to this scheme, and we blow the whole thing open. And if we can't find it in time, then Richard Carmichael becomes the new owner of Bennett Industries, and you go to prison for a crime you didn't commit. The stakes had never been clearer. Arya spent the rest of the day preparing for the meeting with Rebecca, going over every question, every request, every possible contingency. She couldn't afford mistakes. That evening, as the sun set over Chicago, she received one more message from the unknown number. Last chance to walk away. Next time we won't ask nicely. She deleted it without responding. Tomorrow, everything would change. One way or another, she'd have answers. And then the real fight would begin. The morning air was sharp enough to sting when Arya stepped out of her building the next day. She'd chosen deliberately unremarkable clothing, jeans, a black coat, sunglasses, the kind of outfit that let her blend into the downtown crowd. The protesters had thinned out, but a few dedicated souls still held their signs across the street. One of them recognized her anyway. Thief! The word carried across the morning traffic. You should be in jail. Arya kept walking. She'd learned in the past week that responding only made it worse. The court of public opinion had already convicted her. The actual courts would have their turn soon enough. She took the red line to Millennium Park, switching trains twice and doubling back once, exactly as Noah had instructed. Her paranoia felt justified when she spotted the same man in a gray jacket on two different platforms. She lost him in the crowd at Washington Station, but the encounter left her hands shaking. They were watching. Noah had been right about that. The Bean was crowded with tourists taking selfies in its mirrored surface, their distorted reflections bending around the sculpture's curves. Arya found Rebecca sitting on a bench near the north end, a canvas shopping bag at her feet, pretending to read a book. Arya sat down at the opposite end of the bench and pulled out her phone, mimicking the posture of someone waiting for a friend. You're late, Rebecca said without looking up from her book. I was making sure I wasn't followed. Were you? I thought so. Lost him at Washington Station. Arya kept her voice low. Did you bring what I asked for? Rebecca turned a page, still not looking at her. Do you know what you're asking me to risk? Martin's been with the company for 8 years. He's never given me a reason to doubt him. And now you want me to believe he's some kind of criminal mastermind? I don't want you to believe anything. I want you to look at the evidence and make your own decision. The evidence says you stole $400 million. The evidence was manufactured by someone who had the access and knowledge to make it look perfect. Arya watched a family pose for photos, their smiles bright and uncomplicated. Rebecca, I know you don't owe me anything, but I'm asking you to consider the possibility that Martin isn't who you think he is. Rebecca finally looked at her, and Arya saw the conflict written plainly on her face. He was upset after the board meeting. I've never seen him like that. He kept saying it didn't make sense, that you wouldn't do this, that something was wrong. Then help me prove what's wrong. A long pause. Then Rebecca reached into the shopping bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. His calendar data for the past 2 years. I printed it because digital files can be traced. There's also a list of all vendor contracts he personally approved, including Phoenix Asset Management, and... She hesitated. There are some emails between Martin and Mr. Carmichael. They're marked confidential, but they were on his computer and he never password protected his local files. Arya took the envelope carefully as if it might explode. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just tell me I didn't just betray a good man for nothing. I hope you didn't. I really do. Arya stood up. One more thing. Has Martin seemed different lately? Changed his routine? Seemed stressed? Anything unusual? Rebecca thought about it. He's been leaving early on Thursdays, around 3. Says he has a standing appointment. Medical? He never said, but it's been going on for about 6 months. 6 months. Right around the time the investigation into Arya must have started heating up. Do you know where he goes? No, and I didn't ask. Rebecca looked away. Ms. Bennett, I hope you're right about all this, because if you're wrong, I just threw away my career for a conspiracy theory. If I'm wrong, we both lose everything. They left separately. Arya walked north through the park, the envelope tucked inside her coat, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't look at the contents until she was safely back on the train, wedged into a corner seat where no one could see over her shoulder. Martin's calendar was a revelation. Every meeting, every appointment, every lunch marked with obsessive detail. She scanned through the months, looking for patterns, anomalies, anything that didn't fit. There. Thursday afternoons, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., blocked out with a simple note, REC. Recurring appointment, no location, no details. Starting in October and continuing through to the present. She flipped to the vendor contracts. Phoenix Asset Management had been approved in March 2019 with a glowing recommendation from Martin. But there was another company listed too, Cascade Financial Group. The contract was dated September, 6 months ago, for financial consulting services. The amount? $2.5 million. Cascade Financial Group, one of the shell companies the stolen money had passed through. Arya's hands were trembling as she pulled out the emails. Most were routine business correspondence between Martin and Richard, the kind of mundane communications that kept a company running. But one thread buried in the middle made her blood run cold. From Richard Carmichael to Martin Price, dated August 14th. We need to accelerate the timeline. The window won't stay open forever. Have you made the necessary arrangements? Martin's response? Everything's in place. The accounting trail is clean. When the audit hits, it'll be ironclad. Richard's reply. Good. And you're certain she won't see it coming? Martin. Arya trusts me. She won't know until it's too late. The email was dated 4 months before the scandal broke. Arya read it 3 times, each pass making her feel sicker. Martin had known. He'd been part of it from the beginning. All those late nights they'd worked together, all those conversations about building something that mattered, all those moments she'd thought of him as family. He'd been planning her destruction the entire time. She called Noah from the burner phone, her voice barely steady. I got the emails. Martin's involved. It's all here. Send me pictures of everything. Don't email, don't text. Use the encrypted app I showed you. Her hands were shaking too hard to work the camera properly. It took 3 tries to get clear photos of the emails. Noah, it was him. The whole time. He was working with Richard to set me up. I know this hurts, but right now we need to focus on what we can prove. Noah's voice was clinical, professional. These emails are good, but they're not enough. A good lawyer could argue they're about something else, taken out of context. We need the financial records that tie the shell companies directly to Richard and Martin. How do we get those? We break into Bennett Industries and steal them. Arya almost laughed. You're joking. I'm not. Your company's servers have the original transaction records, the authorization logs, everything. The FBI will get access eventually, but by then, Richard will have had time to scrub anything incriminating. We need to get there first. That's insane. It's illegal. It's the only way to prove your innocence before you're arrested. Noah's voice softened. Arya, the DA is building a case. My sources say they're planning to bring charges within the week. Once that happens, you're done. No bail, no freedom to investigate, nothing. This is our last chance. She closed her eyes, thinking through the impossibility of what he was suggesting. Bennett Industries had security, cameras, access controls. Even if she could get inside, she'd be caught within minutes. I can't just walk into my old office and start downloading files. They revoked my credentials. But you know the building. You know the security patterns, the blind spots, when the cleaning crew comes through? Noah paused. And I'm guessing you know someone who still has access. Someone who might be willing to help if they knew what was really happening. Martin's face flashed through her mind, then Rebecca's. You want me to ask Rebecca to help us break in? No, too risky for her, but there's someone else. Someone who's been at Bennett Industries longer than anyone. Someone who probably has master access to everything. Arya understood. James Morrison, head of building operations. He'd been there since before Arya founded the company, back when the building housed a different firm entirely. He knew every system, every override code, every quirk in the security setup. And he'd been the only person in the building who'd looked at her with something like sympathy when she'd cleaned out her office. I don't know if he'll help, she said. Then convince him. Because this is happening tonight. I've already scouted the building. There's a maintenance window from midnight to 3 a.m. when they do system updates. The security cameras will be on a loop. That's our opening. You've already planned this. I've been planning it since we started. I hoped we wouldn't need it, but I'm a big believer in backup plans. Noah's voice took on an edge. Arya, I need to know you're with me on this, because once we do this, there's no going back. We'll be criminals, actually guilty of something. We're stealing evidence of a crime. We're breaking and entering. The distinction matters to the law. He waited. So what's it going to be? Arya thought about Martin's emails, about 18 months of betrayal, about the protesters outside her building who thought she was a monster, about the life she'd built being torn apart by people she'd trusted. I'm in. Tell me what I need to do. That evening, Arya stood outside a dive bar in Bridgeport, the kind of place that served cheap beer and didn't ask questions. James Morrison was already inside, sitting at the far end of the bar, nursing a whiskey that looked like it wasn't his first. He saw her coming and sighed. Ms. Bennett, didn't think I'd see you again. Can we talk? Somewhere private? He gestured to the empty stools around him. This is about as private as it gets. Most folks here mind their own business. Arya sat down, ordered a club soda she didn't want, and tried to figure out how to ask someone to commit a felony. You think I did it, she said finally. Stole the money. James took a long drink. Don't matter what I think. Board says you did it. That's good enough for most people. But not for you? He looked at her directly for the first time. I've worked in that building for 23 years. Seen a lot of executives come and go. Most of them were in it for themselves. Didn't care about the people who kept the lights on and the AC running. You were different. You knew my name, asked about my kids, gave Christmas bonuses that actually meant something. He set down his glass. So no, I don't think you did it, but I also don't know who did. And I'm not stupid enough to get involved in something that could cost me my pension. What if I could prove someone set me up? What if I could show you evidence that the real criminals are still running my company? That's what lawyers are for. Lawyers need evidence, and the evidence is locked inside Bennett Industries on servers I can't access anymore. Arya leaned closer. James, I need to get into the building tonight. I need to access the financial database and download the original transaction records. It's the only way to prove what really happened. James laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want me to help you break into the building I'm paid to protect? You know how crazy that sounds? I know exactly how it sounds. I also know you're a good man who doesn't want to see an innocent person go to prison. You don't know you're innocent. For all I know, you're a con artist who's real good at playing the victim. Then come with me. See the evidence for yourself. If I'm lying, turn me in. Call the cops, tell the board, do whatever you want. But if I'm telling the truth, help me prove it. James was quiet for a long time, staring into his whiskey like it might have answers. What's in this for me, other than possible jail time and definitely losing my job? The truth, and maybe a clear conscience. Arya pulled out her phone and showed him the photos of Martin's emails. This is what they were saying about me 4 months before the scandal broke. These are the people who are still running Bennett Industries. He read slowly, his expression hardening with each line. When he finished, he pushed the phone back across the bar. Martin Price, son of a bitch. I never liked that guy. He drained his whiskey. All right, I'll help you. But we do this my way, we follow my rules, and if anything goes wrong, I'm the one who makes the call about when to abort. Agreed. And Ms. Bennett? If it turns out you're playing me, I'll make sure you regret it. Fair enough. They met Noah at a 24-hour diner in the Loop at 11 p.m. He had a laptop open and a layout of Bennett Industries pulled up on the screen. James, this is Noah Hayes. He's the forensic accountant helping with the investigation. James looked Noah up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who'd spent decades judging whether people belonged in places they were trying to access. You look like you haven't slept in a week. It's been longer than that. Noah turned the laptop toward them. Here's the plan. The security system goes into maintenance mode at midnight. During that window, the cameras loop their previous hour of footage. That gives us 3 hours to get in, access the servers, and get out. 3 hours isn't much time, James said. It's what we have. The financial database is on the 3rd floor, server room 3B. We need to access the primary storage array and download everything from March 2019 to present. That's years of data. Could be terabytes. Which is why I brought these. Noah pulled out 3 external hard drives, each the size of a paperback book. Military-grade storage, fast transfer rates. Should handle it. James studied the building layout. The server room requires badge access and a PIN code. I have both, but there's a secondary biometric scan for the database terminals. Can you bypass it? Maybe. Depends on which system they're using now. They upgraded security after... He trailed off, glancing at Arya. After the scandal broke. After they needed to look like they were taking security seriously, Arya said flatly. What about the security guards? 2 on duty during graveyard shift. They do rounds every 90 minutes. If we time it right, we can be in and out between patrols. James looked at Noah. You done this kind of thing before? Define this kind of thing. Breaking into secured buildings to steal corporate data. Noah hesitated. Let's just say I have experience recovering evidence from uncooperative sources. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. James grunted. Good enough. What about you, Ms. Bennett? You ready for this? Arya thought about the alternative. Arrest, trial, prison time for a crime she didn't commit while the real criminals walked free. I'm ready. Then let's go steal your life back. They approached the building separately, meeting in the loading dock at 12:07 a.m. The street was empty, most of the neighboring office buildings dark. James used his master key to access the service entrance, and they slipped inside. The interior was familiar yet alien in the darkness. Arya had walked these halls hundreds of times, but never like this. Creeping through shadows, listening for footsteps, every sense on high alert. It felt like trespassing in her own past. They took the service stairs to the 3rd floor, avoiding the elevator and its camera. James moved with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of the building, leading them through a maze of hallways and maintenance corridors that Arya had never known existed. Server room 3B was at the end of a long corridor lined with frosted glass offices. James swiped his badge and entered his PIN. The door clicked open, but a red light above the biometric scanner blinked insistently. This is new, James muttered. They added retinal scanning. Can you bypass it? Noah asked. Not without tripping an alarm. James examined the scanner. This is corporate-grade security. It logs every access attempt. If I override it, someone will know. How long before they respond to an alarm? Security company gets notified immediately. They'll call the guards first, probably show up themselves within 20 minutes. Noah looked at Arya. 20 minutes might be enough, but we'd be racing the clock, and if we don't finish in time, we'll be caught red-handed, Arya finished. Do it. James pulled out a small toolkit and went to work on the scanner's access panel. You're sure about this? I'm not sure about anything anymore, but I'm done running. It took James 90 seconds to bypass the retinal scanner. The light turned green and the interior door unlocked with a heavy click. The server room beyond was a cathedral of blinking lights and humming machinery, racks of equipment stretching from floor to ceiling. Noah headed straight for the central terminal. Which system? There. Arya pointed to a cluster of servers marked with Bennett Industries' logo. The financial database runs on those. Noah plugged in his laptop and started typing commands faster than Arya could follow. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, system prompts appearing and disappearing. Okay, I'm in. Starting the data extraction. The first hard drive lit up as data began transferring. 3%, 7%, 12%. How long? James asked, checking his watch. 15 minutes if the connection holds. Could be longer if the network throttles the transfer speed. We don't have 15 minutes. The alarm's already been triggered. We've got 10, maybe 12 before security arrives. Noah's jaw tightened. Then we get as much as we can in the time we have. They stood in tense silence, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. 24%, 31%, 38%. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. Voices echoed through the corridor. Guards are coming early, James hissed. We need to move. Not yet. Noah's fingers flew across the keyboard. I'm pulling the Phoenix asset management contracts. If we can get those, we have enough to get... Now, son, we need to leave now. The voices were getting closer. Footsteps in the hallway, moving toward the server room. Noah grabbed the first hard drive, still transferring data, and yanked it free. Go. Out the back. They ran. James led them through another maintenance corridor, then down a service stairwell Arya hadn't known existed. Behind them, she heard the server room door opening, someone shouting into a radio. They burst out of the building through an emergency exit that should have been alarmed but somehow wasn't. James's work, Arya realized. He'd planned escape routes before they'd even gone in. They split up on the street. James disappearing toward the train station, Noah and Arya heading in opposite directions with instructions to meet at a predetermined location in an hour. Arya walked 10 blocks before she felt safe enough to slow down. Her heart was hammering, her hands shaking from adrenaline. They'd done it. They'd actually broken into Bennett Industries and stolen the evidence. Now they just had to hope it was enough. She met Noah at an all-night laundromat in Ukrainian village. He was already there, laptop open, scrolling through the data they'd extracted. Did we get it? She asked. We got 64% of the total database before we had to bail. It's not everything, but it's something. He pulled up a folder, including the complete Phoenix asset management contract and all the authorization records for the shell company transfers. That's good, right? It's great. Look at this. He turned the screen toward her. These are the original transfer authorizations, the ones the board thinks you signed. But look at the metadata. Arya leaned closer. Each document showed a timestamp, an IP address, and authentication details. What am I looking for? The IP addresses. They're supposed to be from your office terminal, but 3 of them are from external locations, coffee shops, public Wi-Fi hotspots, places you never went. I work from the office. I never authorize financial transfers from coffee shops. Exactly, which means someone was using your credentials remotely. They had your login information, but they screwed up by not always using it from your physical location. Noah pulled up another file. And here's the beautiful part. I cross-referenced these IP addresses with the timestamps. Guess where else these same IP addresses show up? Where? Martin Price's personal email account. He accessed his Gmail from these exact same locations within minutes of the fraudulent transfers being authorized. Noah's smile was grim. He was using your stolen credentials to make the transfers, but he got lazy and checked his personal email while he was at it. That's the crack in the perfect crime. Arya felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, but close. This proves Martin was behind it. It proves someone using Martin's email was at the same locations where your credentials were used fraudulently. A good prosecutor could argue he was set up too, but combined with those emails Rebecca gave us, it starts to paint a pretty damning picture. What about Richard Carmichael? Can we connect him directly? Noah's expression fell. Not yet. The emails show coordination between him and Martin, but they're vague enough to claim plausible deniability. We need something explicit, a payment record, a contract, something that shows Richard directly benefiting from the fraud. So we still don't have enough. We have enough to create reasonable doubt about your guilt. We don't have enough to prove theirs beyond reasonable doubt. Noah closed his laptop. But we're close. There's one more thing we need. What? Martin's personal financial records. If he's been receiving payments from Richard or the shell companies, that's our smoking gun. But those won't be on Bennett Industries' servers. They'll be wherever Martin does his personal banking. Arya thought about it. Rebecca might know. She handles his expense reports, his reimbursements. She might have seen his bank information. Can you ask her without tipping off Martin? I can try. Noah checked his watch. It's 3 a.m. Get some sleep. We'll regroup tomorrow and figure out our next move. Sleep, right. Arya laughed without humor. Because that's definitely happening tonight. Fair point. He started packing up his laptop. Arya? What we did tonight, breaking into the building, that was a felony. If this goes wrong, if we can't prove your innocence, we just handed them another charge to hit you with. I know. And you're okay with that? She thought about Martin's betrayal, about Richard's manipulation, about the protesters and the headlines and the jury that had already convicted her in the court of public opinion. I'm okay with fighting back. Everything else is just details. She called Rebecca the next morning from yet another burner phone. They were going through them quickly now. Noah's paranoia about surveillance proving well-founded. Twice in the past week, Arya had spotted the same vehicles following her. She'd changed apartments, staying with Patricia Chen when her lawyer wasn't around, moving every few days to avoid patterns. Rebecca, I need one more thing. Does Martin keep any personal financial documents at the office? Bank statements, tax returns, anything like that? Why would he keep personal documents at work? I don't know, but if he did, where would they be? Rebecca was quiet for a long time. There's a locked drawer in his desk. I've never seen inside it. He keeps the key on his personal keychain. What about his computer? Would he have digital copies? Maybe, but I don't have his password, and I'm not breaking into his office to find out. Rebecca's voice hardened. Miss Bennett, I already risked my career once for you. I gave you what you asked for. I'm not doing this anymore. Rebecca, I understand. No, you don't. Martin's been asking questions, wondering how you got information about his calendar. He suspects someone gave you access. If he figures out it was me, she stopped. I have student loans. I have rent. I can't afford to lose this job on the hope that you're telling the truth. I am telling the truth. Then prove it without me. I'm sorry, Ms. Bennett. I really am. But I'm done. The line went dead. Arya sat in Patricia's guest room, staring at the burner phone, feeling the walls closing in. They were so close. The evidence was there just out of reach, locked in Martin's desk drawer or buried in his computer files. Her phone buzzed. A text from Noah. Turn on the news, now. She grabbed the remote and flipped to one of the cable news channels. Her own face filled the screen, a photo from last year's shareholders' meeting where she'd been smiling, confident, successful. The caption below read, Bennett Industries CEO to face federal charges. The anchor's voice was professionally somber. Sources close to the investigation say federal prosecutors will file charges against Arya Bennett as early as tomorrow. The charges include wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. If convicted, Bennett could face up to 30 years in prison. 30 years. The room spun slightly. Arya sat down hard on the bed, the remote falling from her hands. Her phone rang. Patricia Chen. I just saw, Arya said. They're moving faster than I expected. We need to talk strategy. If they're filing tomorrow, we need to be ready. Ready how? We can't prove I'm innocent yet. Then we focus on bail. We make the argument that you're not a flight risk, that you have ties to the community, that, Patricia, I broke into my old office last night and stole corporate data. If they find out about that, there won't be any bail. Silence on the other end. Then, very carefully, tell me you're joking. I needed evidence. The only place to get it was inside Bennett Industries. So we went in and took it. We? Who's we? Noah Hayes and James Morrison, the building operations manager. Patricia's voice went deadly quiet. Arya, I'm your lawyer. I'm supposed to defend you. How am I supposed to do that when you're actively committing crimes? I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, and you chose to make my job impossible. Patricia took a breath, audibly trying to control her temper. Did you at least find anything useful? We found proof that Martin Price was accessing my credentials from remote locations. We found emails between him and Richard Carmichael planning the setup. We're close to connecting everything. Close doesn't matter in court. Either you have proof or you don't. Then we get proof. Martin has personal financial records. If he's been receiving payments from Richard or the shell companies, how do you plan to get those records? Break into his house? Steal his mail? Every piece of evidence you obtain illegally makes you look guiltier and makes it harder for me to defend you. Arya felt tears of frustration burning behind her eyes. So what do I do? Just turn myself in and hope the system works? We both know how this ends. I go to prison while Richard and Martin get away with everything. I know you're scared. I know this feels hopeless. But Arya, you have to trust the legal process. You have to let me do my job. The legal process already failed me. The board convicted me without evidence. The media convicted me without a trial. The system doesn't work for people like me anymore. Then what's your plan? Keep breaking laws until you get caught? Because that's not a plan. That's suicide. Arya didn't have an answer. That night, unable to sleep, she pulled out the hard drives Noah had given her and went through the data herself. Thousands of files, millions of transactions, a digital paper trail of her company's entire financial history. She found the Phoenix Asset Management contract at 2 a.m., buried in a folder marked Archived Vendors. The agreement was straightforward, $3.2 million over 2 years for comprehensive IT security services. Martin's signature on the approval page. Richard Carmichael listed as a reference. But there was something else, an addendum to the contract, dated 3 months after the original agreement. It authorized Phoenix Asset Management to conduct deep system integration, which included full administrative access to all financial databases and biometric authentication protocols. In other words, permission to access everything they'd needed to frame her. And the addendum was signed by both Martin and Richard. Arya's hands were shaking as she photographed the document. This was it. This was the connection they needed. Both men, in writing, authorizing a fake company to have complete access to the systems that were later used to commit fraud. She called Noah at 2:30 a.m. I found it. The Phoenix Asset Management contract has an addendum signed by both Martin and Richard. They authorize complete system access. Send me the photos. She did. Heard him swear softly on the other end. This is good. This is really good. But Arya, we have a problem. What now? I've been thinking about the timeline. The scandal broke publicly 7 days ago. The board removed you 8 days ago. Federal charges are coming tomorrow. That's too fast. Way too fast for a normal securities fraud investigation. What are you saying? I'm saying someone's been pushing this along behind the scenes. Someone with influence over the prosecutors, the investigators, maybe even the FBI. Noah paused. Someone with the political connections to make sure you're charged, tried, and convicted before you have time to mount a real defense. Richard? He's connected. Sits on boards, donates to campaigns, has friends in high places. If he's been calling in favors, he could absolutely accelerate the prosecution timeline. Arya felt sick. So even with the evidence we found, even with proof of the setup, they might charge me anyway? They will charge you anyway. Tomorrow, like the news said. The question is whether we can get this evidence in front of someone who'll actually look at it before they throw you in jail. Noah's voice was tight. We need to go public, tonight. Give everything to the press, the SEC, the FBI. Flood the zone with information so they can't ignore it. Patricia said any evidence we obtained illegally would be inadmissible. In court, maybe. But in the court of public opinion, in the media circus that's already convicted you, this could change everything. Noah paused. But you have to be sure. Once we release this, there's no taking it back. Martin and Richard will know we're coming for them. They'll fight back with everything they have. Arya thought about the past week. The humiliation, the betrayal, the protesters calling her a thief. She thought about 30 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit. Do it, she said. Send everything to every journalist you can find. I'm done playing defense. Okay, give me 2 hours. Arya spent those 2 hours pacing Patricia's apartment, drinking coffee she didn't need, rehearsing the conversation she'd have to have once this went public. Her mother would call, horrified. Former friends would distance themselves even further. The board would accuse her of trying to muddy the waters. But maybe, just maybe, someone would listen. At 4:47 a.m., her phone buzzed. A news alert. New evidence in Bennett Industries scandal suggests CEO may have been framed. Then another. Forensic accountant claims to have proof of corporate conspiracy. And another. Bennett case takes shocking turn as internal documents surface. Noah had done it. The story was everywhere. By sunrise, Arya's phone was ringing constantly. Reporters wanting statements, former colleagues claiming they'd always believed in her. Even a few board members backpedaling frantically, suggesting they'd had doubts about her guilt all along. Patricia called at 7 a.m., her voice tight with controlled fury. What did you do? What I had to. You just made yourself the story again. You gave them ammunition. The prosecution will say you're trying to manipulate public opinion, that you're manufacturing evidence, that this is a desperate ploy by a guilty woman facing justice. Maybe. But at least now people know there's another side to this. People don't care about the truth, Arya. They care about the story. And right now, your story is that you're a desperate criminal throwing out wild accusations. Patricia took a breath. The FBI wants to talk to you today about the evidence you released and where you got it. What do I tell them? The truth. That you hired a forensic accountant who found inconsistencies in the case against you. That you have evidence suggesting you were set up. And Arya, do not mention breaking into Bennett Industries. Do not mention the hard drives. Do not give them any reason to charge you with additional crimes. When do they want to meet? Noon, Federal Building. Bring your lawyer, which would be me, even though I'm seriously reconsidering that decision right now. The FBI interview room was exactly as Arya had imagined. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, a metal table, uncomfortable chairs. 2 agents sat across from her. Special Agent Teresa Kim and Special Agent David Brooks. Both looked tired, which made sense given they'd probably been pulled into emergency meetings when the evidence dump hit the news. Patricia sat beside Arya, her briefcase open, legal pad ready. Ms. Bennett, Agent Kim began, thank you for coming in voluntarily. I want to cooperate fully with your investigation. Good. Then let's start with this morning's news reports. Documents from Bennett Industries servers, allegedly showing coordination between your CFO, Martin Price, and board chairman, Richard Carmichael, to commit fraud. Where did these documents come from? My forensic accountant obtained them during his investigation. How did he obtain them? Patricia jumped in. My client isn't required to disclose the investigative methods of her defense team. Agent Brooks leaned forward. Ms. Bennett, we've spent the past week building a case against you. The evidence is overwhelming. Bank records, transaction logs, authentication data. Everything points to you orchestrating this fraud. And now suddenly you produce documents that conveniently shift blame to other people? The documents aren't convenient, they're true. Then explain how your forensic accountant got access to secured corporate servers that require multiple levels of authentication. Agent Kim's voice was sharp. Because it looks a lot like someone illegally accessed Bennett Industries' computer systems. Arya felt the trap closing. If she admitted to the break-in, they'd charge her with additional crimes. If she lied, she'd be obstructing their investigation. Patricia spoke carefully. My client maintains her innocence regarding the fraud charges. The evidence her investigator uncovered supports that claim. How that evidence was obtained is a separate question. It's not separate, Agent Brooks said. If the evidence was obtained illegally, it's inadmissible. And if your client participated in obtaining it, she's committed additional federal crimes. I didn't steal anything that wasn't already stolen from me, Arya said quietly. Martin Price and Richard Carmichael took my company, my reputation, and my future. All I did was try to find the proof of what they did. That's not how the law works. Then maybe the law is broken. The interview went on for 3 more hours. The agents pressed for details, for names, for specifics Arya couldn't give without incriminating herself further. Patricia blocked most of their questions, but the damage was done. The FBI knew she'd been involved in obtaining the evidence, even if they couldn't prove it yet. When they finally left the federal building, Patricia turned to her with an expression Arya couldn't quite read. "They're going to charge you with computer fraud and wire fraud in addition to the embezzlement. You know that, right?" "I know." "Was it worth it?" Arya thought about the headlines that morning. The sudden shift in public perception, the cracks appearing in Richard's perfect setup. "Ask me again after we see how this plays out." The call came at 6 a.m. the next morning, while Arya was staring at her third cup of coffee and wondering if she'd ever sleep normally again. Noah's voice was rough, like he'd been shouting or hadn't used it in hours. "Turn on Channel 7, right now." She fumbled for the remote. The morning news was already running a banner headline. Bennett Industries CFO Martin Price refuses to comment on allegations. The screen showed Martin walking into the Bennett Industries building, surrounded by reporters shouting questions. He looked haggard, his usual composure cracked around the edges. Someone thrust a microphone in his face. "Mr. Price, did you conspire with Richard Carmichael to frame Arya Bennett?" No comment. "Are the documents released yesterday authentic?" No comment. "Did you authorize Phoenix Asset Management to access Bennett Industries' financial systems?" Martin stopped walking. For just a second, something flickered across his face. Fear, maybe, or calculation. Then it was gone. "I have nothing to say at this time. Bennett Industries will be releasing a statement later today." He pushed through the crowd and disappeared into the building. The anchor came back on screen. Martin Price's silence comes as federal investigators confirm they are now looking into possible coordination between Bennett Industries executives and the alleged fraud scheme. Sources say the FBI has requested additional documentation from the company regarding vendor contracts and authorization protocols. Arya muted the television. "They're running scared." "Scared people make mistakes," Noah said. "We need to be ready to capitalize when they do." "Where are you right now?" "Patricia's apartment in Lincoln Park." "Stay there. Don't go anywhere alone. If Martin and Richard are feeling cornered, they might try something desperate." He paused. "I'm going to keep digging into their financial connections. There's got to be money flowing somewhere we haven't looked yet." "Noah, the FBI knows we broke into Bennett Industries. They're going to come after us." "Let them. We're not the ones who stole $400 million. His voice softened. "Arya, I know this is terrifying, but we're winning. Slowly, but we're winning. Don't lose your nerve now." After he hung up, Arya sat in the quiet apartment and tried to believe him. The public narrative was shifting. She could feel it in the tone of the news coverage, in the questions reporters were asking, in the way people online were starting to debate her guilt instead of assuming it. But winning in the court of public opinion didn't mean winning in an actual court. Patricia emerged from her bedroom, already dressed in a suit despite the early hour. "I have a meeting with the prosecutors this morning. They want to discuss a plea deal." "I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do." "I know, but I need to hear what they're offering so we understand what we're up against." She poured herself coffee. "The evidence you released yesterday has them rattled. The Phoenix Asset Management contract is damaging to their narrative, but they're not going to drop the charges just because there's an alternative theory." "So what happens now?" "Now we build our defense. We find expert witnesses who can testify about the security vulnerabilities in your company's systems. We challenge the authenticity of every document they claim has your authorization. We create reasonable doubt." Patricia sat down across from her. "But Arya, I need you to be honest with me about something. How much of Noah Hayes' investigation involved illegal activity?" "I don't know all the details of what he did." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Noah found evidence that I'm innocent. How he found it is between him and his conscience." Patricia's expression hardened. "If he testifies at your trial, the prosecution will shred his credibility. They'll paint him as a rogue investigator who fabricated evidence to help his client. Every piece of data he provides will be tainted by how he obtained it. Then we find another way to introduce the evidence." "There is no other way. The rules of evidence exist for a reason, and one of those reasons is to prevent exactly what you did, breaking into private computer systems to steal data." Arya felt anger flaring. "They stole my entire life. Forgive me if I'm not concerned about the technicalities of how I got it back." "The technicalities are what will keep you out of prison or put you in it for even longer." Patricia stood up. "I'll be back this afternoon. While I'm gone, I need you to think very carefully about what you want your defense strategy to be. Because right now, I don't know how to defend someone who keeps committing new crimes while I'm trying to prove she didn't commit the old ones." She left. Arya sat alone in the apartment, feeling the walls close in again. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." She stared at it for a long moment, then typed back. "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who's trying to help you. Stop digging. Take the plea deal. Move on with your life." "I didn't do anything wrong." "That doesn't matter anymore. You've lost. Accept it." Arya's hands were shaking. "Tell Richard and Martin I'm not stopping until everyone knows what they did." A long pause. Then, "You have a choice. Walk away now, or we make this much worse. You think the fraud charges are bad? Wait until we're done." She took a screenshot and forwarded it to Noah, then blocked the number. He called within minutes. "That's a direct threat. You need to tell the FBI." "And tell them what? That the people I accused of framing me are now threatening me? They'll say I'm making it up for sympathy." "Arya, this is serious. If they're threatening you directly, they're desperate. Desperate people do dangerous things." "I know, but I'm not backing down." "Then at least let me hire security for you. Someone to make sure you're not alone. Someone to... With what money? My accounts are frozen, remember? I can barely afford the burner phones we keep going through." Noah was quiet for a moment. "I have some savings. Not much, but enough for a few days of protection. I'm not taking your money. It's not about money. It's about keeping you alive long enough to prove your innocence." His voice cracked slightly. "I can't. I have a son, Arya. I know what it's like to worry about someone you care about getting hurt. Please, just let me help." The emotion in his voice caught her off guard. They'd been working together for less than 2 weeks, but somewhere in the chaos and danger, they'd become something more than attorney and client, more than investigator and suspect. They'd become allies, maybe even friends. "Okay," she said quietly, "but just for a few days. Until this calms down." "It's not going to calm down. It's going to get worse before it gets better." He was right. That afternoon, Bennett Industries released an official statement. It was read by the company's general counsel on the steps of the corporate headquarters, surrounded by cameras and microphones. Bennett Industries has been made aware of certain allegations regarding our CFO, Martin Price, and board chairman Richard Carmichael. We take these allegations seriously and have launched an internal investigation. However, we want to be clear. The evidence of fraud committed by former CEO Arya Bennett remains overwhelming and irrefutable. The documents released yesterday do not change the fundamental facts of this case. Ms. Bennett used her position to embezzle hundreds of millions of dollars from this company, and she will be held accountable for her crimes. Any attempt to shift blame to other executives is a desperate distraction from her guilt. The statement was carefully worded, legally precise, and completely infuriating. Arya watched it on the news, feeling her blood pressure spike with every word. They were doubling down. Instead of investigating Martin and Richard, they were protecting them. Her phone rang. A number she recognized, Martin Price, calling from his office line. She answered before she could think better of it. "Arya." His voice was strained. "We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Please, just listen. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. You set me up. You destroyed my life. What could you possibly say that I'd want to hear? It wasn't supposed to happen like this." He sounded genuinely distressed, which only made it worse. "I never wanted you to get hurt. You have to believe me." "I don't have to believe anything you say. You're a liar and a thief. I'm trying to help you. The statement today, that wasn't my call. Richard pushed it through over my objections. He wants to bury this, but He stopped. "Meet me. Tonight. There's a park near your old apartment, the one with the fountain. 10 o'clock. I'll tell you everything." "So you can have me arrested? So you can finish what you started? So I can give you what you need to prove your innocence?" His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I kept records. Insurance, in case Richard ever turned on me. I have evidence that shows exactly what happened, who planned it, who executed it, everything you need to clear your name." Arya's heart was pounding. "Why would you help me now?" "Because this has gone too far. Because I didn't sign up for threatening you or trying to send you to prison for 30 years. Because His voice broke. Because I'm sorry, Arya, for whatever that's worth. The line went dead. Arya sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. It could be a trap, probably was a trap. Martin had lied to her for 18 months. Why would he suddenly develop a conscience now? But what if he was telling the truth? What if he really did have evidence that could end this? She called Noah. Don't even think about it, he said immediately when she told him about Martin's call. It's obviously a setup. What if it's not? Then he can give you the evidence through official channels, through lawyers, through the FBI. He doesn't need to meet you in a dark park at night unless he's planning something, or unless he's afraid of being seen with me. If Richard finds out Martin's talking to me, he'll bury him too. Arya, listen to yourself. You're rationalizing. You want to believe Martin has evidence because you're desperate for a way out of this. But meeting him alone in a park is how people get hurt. Then come with me. We'll both go. If it's a trap, we'll see it coming. Noah was quiet for a long time. I don't like this. I know, but we're running out of options. Patricia says our defense is weak. The FBI thinks I'm guilty. We need something that changes the game completely. If Martin really does have records, documentation that proves the conspiracy, then he should go to the authorities. He won't. He's in too deep. But if he'll give the evidence to me, we can use it. Or he'll kill you and make it look like you tried to run. The bluntness of it stopped her cold. She hadn't let herself think about it in those terms. About actual physical danger, about violence, about the possibility that this could end with more than just prison time. I have to try, she said finally. I've spent 2 weeks running and hiding and defending myself. Maybe it's time to go on offense. This is a terrible idea. Probably, but I'm doing it anyway. You coming or not? Noah sighed. Yeah, I'm coming, but we do this smart. We get there early, scope out the location, have an exit strategy. And if anything feels wrong, we run. No heroics, no confrontations. Agreed? Agreed. They met at 9 p.m., 2 blocks from the park. Noah had brought a backpack with supplies, flashlights, a first aid kit, a digital recorder, and something wrapped in cloth that Arya suspected was a weapon. Please tell me that's not a gun, she said. It's pepper spray. I have a 5-year-old son, remember? I'm not comfortable with firearms. He saw her expression. What? You'd prefer I brought nothing? I'd prefer this whole situation was different. They walked to the park separately, approaching from different directions. The playground was empty at this hour, the swings moving slightly in the wind. The fountain Martin had mentioned was in the center, water still running despite the cooling weather. Noah positioned himself behind a cluster of trees about 30 yards away, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to stay hidden. Arya stood by the fountain, checking her watch every 30 seconds. At 10:03, Martin appeared. He looked worse than he had on the news that morning, disheveled, unshaven, his clothes rumpled like he'd been wearing them for days. He approached slowly, hands visible, clearly trying not to spook her. You came, he said. You said you had evidence. I do. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Everything's on here, emails between Richard and me, financial transfers showing how he funded the shell companies, documentation of how we accessed your credentials and set up the fraud trail, all of it. Arya stared at the small device. It looked so ordinary, so insignificant. Why now? Why give this to me after everything you've done? Because Richard's planning to kill you. Martin said it flatly, without emotion. The threats you've been getting, the pressure to take a plea deal, it's all leading somewhere. He has people watching you, tracking your movements. Once you're arrested and in custody, he's going to arrange an accident. Make it look like suicide. Guilty CEO can't handle the shame, takes her own life before trial. Arya felt ice water run through her veins. You're lying. I wish I was, but Richard doesn't leave loose ends, and you're the biggest loose end he's ever had. Martin held out the flash drive. This is my way out. I give you the evidence, you take down Richard, and maybe the prosecutors go easier on me for cooperating. You want immunity. I want to not spend the rest of my life in prison. If that means throwing Richard under the bus, fine. He was going to do the same to me eventually. Martin's hand was shaking slightly. Take it, Arya. Please. Before he realizes I'm here. She reached for the flash drive. Their fingers were inches apart when she heard the footsteps. 3 men emerged from the darkness, moving fast. Not running, but walking with purpose. One of them was speaking into a phone. "It's a setup," Noah's voice came from the trees. "Run!" But Martin was faster than she expected. He grabbed her wrist, pulled her close, his other hand going to his jacket pocket. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I really am." Then he shoved her away, hard. She stumbled backwards, fell, hit the ground next to the fountain. The flash drive went flying, landing somewhere in the grass. The men were on Martin in seconds. She heard shouting, a struggle, and then Martin's voice loud and clear. "She attacked me. I was trying to reason with her and she attacked me." Arya scrambled to her feet, looked for the flash drive in the darkness, but the men were between her and where it had landed. One of them was already filming with his phone. "Get it all," the man said. "Make sure you get her face." This was the real trap. Not violence, but theater. They were going to claim she'd assaulted Martin, that she'd tried to intimidate a witness, that she'd violated the terms of her release. More charges, more evidence of guilt, more nails in her coffin. Noah appeared from the trees, grabbed her arm. "We have to go, now!" They ran. Behind them, she heard Martin shouting, the men pursuing. They cut through the playground, jumped a low fence, and sprinted down an alley between apartment buildings. "Where's your car?" Noah gasped. "2 blocks east." They ran harder. Behind them, footsteps and voices getting closer. Noah pulled something from his pocket, not pepper spray, but a handful of ball bearings. He threw them behind them without looking back. Someone cursed. There was a crash. The footsteps fell back. They reached Arya's car and threw themselves inside. She started the engine with shaking hands, pulled out without checking for traffic, drove 3 blocks before she trusted herself to speak. "The flash drive. We left it." "It was fake," Noah said, breathing hard. "Had to be. Martin was stalling, keeping you in place until those guys could get footage of the meeting. They're going to edit it to make it look like you assaulted him." "How do you know the flash drive was fake?" "Because Martin Price doesn't have a conscience, and he doesn't feel guilty. Everything he said was scripted to keep you there long enough to spring the trap." Noah looked back through the rear window. "No one's following. I think we lost them." Arya's hands were trembling on the steering wheel. "He said Richard was planning to kill me. He said that to scare you, to make you desperate enough to trust him." Noah's voice was grim. "But Arya, even if it was a lie to manipulate you, that doesn't mean the underlying threat isn't real. Richard's committed hundreds of millions in fraud. He's destroyed your reputation and stolen your company. If he thinks you're getting close to exposing him, what's one more crime?" She drove aimlessly for 20 minutes, making random turns, doubling back, making sure they weren't being followed. Finally, she pulled into a 24-hour diner parking lot and killed the engine. "We can't keep doing this," she said quietly. "Running, hiding, looking over our shoulders. This has to end." "It will end. When we have enough evidence to bury Richard Carmichael so deep he never sees daylight again. And how do we get that evidence? We can't break into Bennett Industries again. We can't trust anyone inside the company. Martin just proved we can't trust anyone from my old life." She pressed her palms against her eyes. "Noah, we're losing. We keep taking risks and getting nothing back except more danger." "That's not true. We have the Phoenix Asset Management contract. We have the IP address data. We have Martin's emails with Richard. It's not enough yet, but it's something. Something that the FBI won't touch because of how we got it. Something that won't hold up in court because it's tainted." She lowered her hands. "Patricia was right. I made this worse by releasing that evidence. All I did was make myself look more guilty and give the prosecutors more ammunition." Noah reached over and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her beyond accidental brushes and urgent grabs while running. His palm was warm, calloused, steady. "Listen to me. You are not guilty. You didn't steal that money. You didn't betray your company. And you're not going to prison for crimes you didn't commit." His voice was fierce, certain. "We're going to prove your innocence. I don't know how yet, but we will. Because giving up is not an option." "Why do you care so much?" The question came out before she could stop it. "You have a son, a life. You could walk away from this anytime. Why are you still here?" Noah was quiet for a long moment. "You remember I told you I know what it's like when everyone thinks the worst of you?" "Yeah. My ex-wife accused me of being an unfit father during our custody battle. She had lawyers, money, witnesses who said I was neglectful, that I put Jake in danger, that I cared more about my work than my kid." His jaw tightened. "None of it was true. But it didn't matter. The judge looked at me. A single dad who worked long hours and didn't have a perfect track record, and decided Jake was better off with his mother. I'm sorry. I fought it. Hired investigators, gathered evidence, proved that everything she said was fabricated or exaggerated. It took 2 years and almost bankrupted me, but I won custody back. He looked at her directly. So I know what it's like to be innocent and have everyone believe you're guilty, and I know what it takes to prove the truth when the system's already decided against you. That's why I'm here, because nobody should have to fight that battle alone. Arya felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to actually win this thing. Her phone buzzed, a text from Patricia. Where are you? The prosecutors just issued a warrant for your arrest. You need to turn yourself in immediately. Arya showed Noah the message. How fast can they move on a warrant? Depends on the charge. If they're claiming you assaulted Martin, they could have it executed tonight. Then we don't go back to Patricia's apartment. They'll be waiting there. Where do we go? Noah thought for a moment. I have a friend, owes me a favor, lives in Evanston. We can crash there tonight, figure out our next move in the morning. Noah, if you're caught harboring a fugitive, I'm already in this up to my neck. Breaking into Bennett Industries, helping you evade surveillance, withholding evidence from the FBI. If we go down together. They drove north, leaving the city lights behind. Noah's friend turned out to be a woman named Sarah, a former colleague from his forensic accounting days. She answered the door at midnight, took one look at their faces, and let them in without questions. Guest rooms upstairs, second door on the left, she said. There's a bathroom attached. I don't want to know what you're running from, and I don't want to know how long you're staying. You're gone by morning, understood? Understood, Noah said. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't get me arrested. Upstairs, Arya collapsed on the guest bed, fully clothed. Every muscle ached from running, from tension, from 2 weeks of sustained crisis. She should shower, should eat, should call Patricia back. Instead, she just lay there, staring at the ceiling. A knock on the door. Noah, holding 2 bottles of water and looking as exhausted as she felt. Thought you might be thirsty. Thanks. She sat up, took one of the bottles. You should get some sleep. Should, yeah. He sat down on the edge of the bed, not quite close enough to touch, but near enough that she could feel his presence. Arya, about tonight. I'm sorry I let you walk into that trap. I should have seen it coming. We both should have. Martin played us. He's going to use that footage. Tomorrow, maybe the next day, it'll be all over the news. Former CEO attacks witness, threatens executives, whatever story they want to spin. I know. So we need to get ahead of it. Tell our version first. Explain that Martin lured you there with false promises, that it was a setup designed to make you look violent and unstable. Who's going to believe us? People who are already questioning the official story. People who saw the evidence we released and started having doubts. Noah shifted slightly. We're not going to convince everyone. But we don't need to convince everyone. We just need to convince enough people that the prosecutors can't ignore the alternative theory. Arya took a drink of water, buying time to organize her thoughts. Noah, what if we're wrong? What if there's no way to prove this? What if Richard and Martin are just too good at covering their tracks? Then we make them panic, force them into a mistake. He met her eyes. The meeting tonight was supposed to discredit you, but it also proved something important. They're worried. If they weren't, they wouldn't have gone to the trouble of staging that confrontation. They're scared we're getting close. Close to what, though? We still don't have the smoking gun. Not yet. But we know more than we did a week ago. We know Martin has Thursday appointments he won't explain. We know Richard has connections to Phoenix Asset Management. We know money was laundered through shell companies and reinvested in Bennett Industries. Noah leaned forward. There's a pattern here. We just need one more piece to see the whole picture. And if we don't find it before I'm arrested, then I keep looking while you're in custody. Patricia fights the charges. We work every angle we have. They're going to deny bail. After tonight, after I allegedly attacked Martin, they'll say I'm dangerous. Maybe. But Arya, you can't give up, not when we're this close. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the truth would win, that justice would prevail, that somehow this nightmare would end with her vindication instead of her imprisonment. But she was tired, so tired of fighting, of running, of being afraid. What time is it? She asked. Noah checked his phone. Just after 1. We should sleep. You're right. We need to get ahead of whatever Martin's planning to release tomorrow. That means we need to be sharp. He stood up, moved toward the door, then hesitated. For what it's worth, I believe in you. I believe you're innocent, and I believe we're going to prove it. I hope you're right. I'm always right. Just ask my son. He'll tell you I'm annoyingly correct about everything. It was a weak attempt at humor, but Arya smiled anyway. Good night, Noah. Good night. She didn't sleep. Instead, she lay in the darkness and thought about everything that had happened since the first headlines had destroyed her life. The betrayals, the accusations, the slow unraveling of everything she'd built. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, she'd stopped thinking about Bennett Industries as her company and started thinking about it as the thing that had been stolen from her. But maybe that was the wrong way to look at it. Maybe the company didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the truth. What mattered was making sure Richard and Martin didn't win. At 3 a.m., unable to lie still any longer, she got up and went downstairs. The house was dark and quiet. She found Noah in the kitchen, his laptop open, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. Sleep is for people who aren't trying to solve financial conspiracies. He gestured to the screen. I've been going through Richard Carmichael's public financial disclosures, the ones he has to file as a board member of multiple companies. Find anything? Maybe. Look at this. He turned the laptop toward her. Richard sits on the board of Bennett Industries, obviously, but he also sits on the boards of 4 other companies. And over the past 3 years, every single one of them has hired the same IT security vendor. Phoenix Asset Management? Before they dissolved? Yes. And after they dissolved, guess what vendor they all switched to? Arya looked at the screen. Cascade Financial Group, which is one of the shell companies used to launder the money stolen from Bennett Industries. Richard's been running the same scam on multiple companies. Bennett Industries was just the biggest score. The pieces clicked into place. That's why he needed to destroy me. If I'd stayed CEO, I might have eventually noticed the pattern. Might have talked to other executives, compared notes, realized that we'd all been hit by the same fraud scheme. Exactly. You weren't just a victim. You were a threat. The one person with enough visibility and credibility to connect the dots across multiple companies. Noah pulled up another document. I'm betting if we dig into the financials of these other companies, we'll find similar patterns. Unauthorized transfers, shell companies, money being siphoned off in ways that look legitimate until you know what to look for. Can we prove it? Not without accessing their confidential financial records, which we definitely can't do legally. Noah closed the laptop. But we can make the connection public. Force an investigation. Once the SEC starts looking at Richard's involvement with multiple companies that all use the same fraudulent vendor, they'll have to take it seriously. And if they don't, then we make enough noise that they can't ignore it. Tomorrow morning, we contact every business reporter we can find. We lay out the pattern, show them the connections, make it impossible for them to dismiss this as just one company's fraud case. Arya felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, but the absence of hopelessness. They had a strategy. A real one, not just desperate scrambling. Okay, she said. Let's do it. They spent the next 3 hours preparing. Noah compiled the data into a presentation highlighting the connections between Richard, Phoenix Asset Management, and the multiple companies involved. Arya drafted a statement explaining her innocence and the conspiracy she'd uncovered. They cross-referenced every claim, double-checked every fact, made sure nothing could be easily dismissed or debunked. At 6 a.m., Sarah came downstairs, saw them still working, and sighed. You said you'd be gone by morning. We will be, Noah promised. Just give us another hour. 1 hour, then I want you out of my house and out of my life. At 6:47 a.m., the same time the first headlines had appeared 2 weeks ago, they started sending out their presentation. Business reporters, investigative journalists, financial analysts, anyone with a platform and an interest in corporate fraud. 27 emails in total, each one carefully personalized but carrying the same essential message. Richard Carmichael wasn't just a corrupt board member. He was a serial fraudster who'd been running the same scam on multiple companies for years. By 8 a.m., the first responses started coming in. Most were polite rejections or requests for more information. But 3 reporters, 2 from major business publications, and 1 from a financial news network, wanted to talk. They set up calls for later that day. Noah handled the logistics while Arya paced the small guest room, rehearsing what she'd say, how she'd present herself, how to sound credible instead of desperate. At 9 a.m., her phone rang. Patricia Chen, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Where are you?" "Somewhere safe. The warrant for your arrest was executed at my apartment this morning. The FBI showed up with a dozen agents. They tore the place apart looking for you." Patricia took a breath. "Arya, you need to turn yourself in. This is making everything worse." "I can't. Not yet. I'm so close to proving—" "You're close to spending the rest of your life in prison. Running from an arrest warrant is a federal crime. Every hour you're not in custody is another charge they can bring against you." "I know. But if I turn myself in now, they'll bury me. No bail, no contact with the outside world, no way to investigate. Richard wins." "Richard's already won," Patricia's voice cracked. "Arya, please, I'm your lawyer. I'm trying to help you, but I can't do that if you won't listen to me." "I'm sorry, but I need more time." "You don't have more time. They're putting out a BOLO. Be on the lookout to every law enforcement agency in the state. Traffic cameras, license plate readers, facial recognition. They will find you. And when they do, you'll be facing so many charges that even if you're innocent of the original fraud, you'll still spend years in prison." Arya closed her eyes. Patricia was right. Every rational part of her brain knew Patricia was right. But the irrational part, the part that had built a company from nothing, that had fought her way through a male-dominated industry, that had refused to accept defeat even when everyone said she should, that part wasn't ready to surrender. "I'll turn myself in tomorrow," she said. "After the interviews. After we go public with the new evidence. Give me 24 hours. "Arya, 24 hours, Patricia. That's all I'm asking." She hung up before her lawyer could argue further. Noah was standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You know she's right." "I know." "And you're doing this anyway." "I'm doing this anyway." He nodded slowly. "Okay. Then we'd better make these interviews count, because after tomorrow, you might not get another chance." The first interview was at noon, conducted over a video call with a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. Her name was Jennifer Martinez, and she had that particular intensity that came from years of investigating corporate malfeasance. "Ms. Bennett, you're asking me to believe that a respected venture capitalist orchestrated a multi-company fraud scheme spanning several years. Those are serious allegations. What proof do you have?" Arya, with Noah coaching off camera, walked her through the evidence methodically. The Phoenix Asset Management contracts, the connections to Cascade Financial Group, the pattern of the same vendors appearing across multiple companies where Richard served on the board, the IP address data showing Martin Price accessing her credentials from remote locations. Jennifer took notes, asked pointed questions, pushed back on weak points in the narrative. After 40 minutes, she sat back and crossed her arms. "This is compelling, I'll admit that. But here's my problem. Most of this evidence was obtained through legally questionable means. The FBI's already announced they're investigating you for computer fraud. How do I write a story that relies on data you may have stolen?" "The data is real," Noah interjected. "The source doesn't change the facts. The source absolutely changes whether I can publish it." Jennifer looked directly at the camera. "Ms. Bennett, I want to help you. I've covered enough corporate fraud cases to know that the guilty parties are usually the ones in power, not the ones being destroyed by the media. But I need something that can stand up to scrutiny. Something that doesn't involve breaking into your former company's servers." "What about the public disclosures?" Arya pulled up the documents they'd compiled. "Richard Carmichael's board positions, the vendor contracts, all of that is public record. You can verify it independently." "I can. And I will. But public records showing a pattern isn't the same as proof of fraud." Jennifer leaned forward. "Here's what I'm willing to do. I'll write a piece about the questions surrounding your case, the irregularities, the alternative theory, the possibility that you were framed. I won't declare your innocence, but I'll cast enough doubt that other outlets will start paying attention. Fair?" It wasn't everything Arya wanted, but it was something. Fair. The second interview was with a financial news network recorded for broadcast that evening. The reporter was less sympathetic, more focused on the drama than the details. Arya found herself getting defensive, her answers shorter and sharper. "Why should anyone believe you when all the evidence points to your guilt?" Because the evidence was manufactured by people with the means and motive to destroy me. That's convenient. It's the truth. The interview ended badly, with the reporter barely concealing his skepticism. Noah, watching from the side, shook his head. That one's not going to help us. I know, I shouldn't have gotten angry. You're human. You're allowed to be angry. He checked his watch. One more interview, then we need to move. Sarah's been calling. Says there are cars circling the neighborhood, people she doesn't recognize. The third interview was scheduled for 4 p.m., but at 3:47 Aria's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She answered cautiously. Hello? Ms. Bennett, my name is Elena Vasquez. I'm a forensic financial analyst with the SEC. I've been reviewing the information you released about Richard Carmichael and the alleged fraud at Bennett Industries. Aria's heart jumped. You work for the SEC? I do. And I'd like to meet with you. Today, if possible. We have some questions about your allegations. I'm wanted by the FBI. If I meet with you, I'm aware of your legal situation. But what you've uncovered, if it's accurate, suggests a much larger fraud than just one company. The SEC has jurisdiction over securities fraud across multiple corporations. We'd like to investigate, but we need your cooperation. Noah was frantically writing on a notepad. Don't agree to anything without Patricia. I need to consult with my attorney, Aria said carefully. Of course, but Ms. Bennett, time is a factor here. If Richard Carmichael suspects we're investigating, he'll start destroying evidence. We need to move quickly. How did you get my number? You've been emailing reporters all morning. One of them passed your contact information along to us. Elena's voice softened slightly. I know you have no reason to trust anyone right now, but I'm offering you a chance to tell your story to people who can actually do something about it. The FBI is focused on prosecuting you. The SEC is focused on finding the truth. Aria looked at Noah. He shook his head firmly, still writing. It could be a trap, but it could also be real. It could be the break they needed. I'll meet with you, Aria said, but my attorney has to be present, and we meet in a public place. Agreed. There's a coffee shop in the Loop, corner of State and Madison. Can you be there in 2 hours? I'll be there. After she hung up, Noah exploded. Are you insane? This is exactly how they'll catch you. They dangle hope. You show up, and suddenly you're in federal custody. Or it's exactly what it sounds like, an SEC analyst who wants to investigate Richard. We don't know that. We don't know anything for certain anymore. Aria stood up, started pacing. Noah, I'm running out of options. I'm running out of time. If there's even a chance that the SEC will take this seriously, I have to take it. Then let me go instead. I'll meet with her, verify her credentials, make sure it's legitimate before you put yourself at risk. She asked for me specifically. If I don't show up, she'll think I'm not serious. They argued for another 20 minutes before Noah finally gave in. Fine, but we're doing this smart. I'm going to be in that coffee shop before you arrive. I'm going to watch every person who comes and goes. And if anything feels wrong, we abort. Deal? Deal. Patricia was less agreeable when Aria called to tell her about the meeting. This is the worst idea you've had in a series of spectacularly bad ideas. The SEC doesn't make informal coffee shop meetings with fugitives. They issue subpoenas and conduct official interviews with lawyers present. My lawyer will be present. You. I can't be in 2 places at once, and I'm currently dealing with the FBI agents who want to know where you are. Patricia sounded exhausted. Aria, I'm begging you. Turn yourself in. Let me negotiate your surrender. We can probably get you processed quickly, maybe even get a bail hearing scheduled for tomorrow. After I meet with the SEC. There is no SEC meeting. This is a trap designed to catch you. Maybe, but I have to find out. She hung up for the second time that day on her lawyer, feeling like she was burning every bridge she had left. At 5:47 p.m., she walked into the coffee shop on State and Madison. Noah was already there, sitting in a corner with a newspaper and a clear view of the entire space. He caught her eye briefly, gave a subtle shake of his head. No sign of trouble yet. Elena Vasquez was easy to spot. Professional attire, a briefcase, the kind of presence that marked her as someone with authority. She was sitting at a table near the window, watching the door. Their eyes met. Elena raised a hand slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. Aria walked over, every nerve on high alert. Ms. Vasquez? Ms. Bennett, thank you for coming. Elena gestured to the empty chair across from her. Please, sit down. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? I'm fine. Arya sat, positioning herself so she could see both the door and Noah's location. You said you wanted to discuss my allegations about Richard Carmichael. I do. But first, I need you to understand something. Elena opened her briefcase and pulled out an ID badge. Securities and Exchange Commission, Division of Enforcement. The photo matched, the credentials looked real. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm not working with the FBI on your fraud case. I'm investigating a separate matter that your allegations may intersect with. What matter? 3 months ago, we opened an investigation into suspicious trading patterns across several mid-cap companies. Unusual stock movements, unexplained volatility, patterns that suggested insider trading or market manipulation. Your name came up because Bennett Industries was one of the companies flagged. Arya felt her breath catch. You're already investigating this? We're investigating something. We didn't know it was connected to Richard Carmichael until you released those documents yesterday. Elena pulled out a tablet, showed Arya a chart of stock movements. Look at this. Every company where Richard serves on the board has experienced similar patterns. Stock price drops following negative news, then strategic buybacks at reduced prices, then eventual recovery. Someone's been manipulating these companies' stock values to buy shares cheap and sell them high. That's securities fraud. Yes, and if we can prove Richard orchestrated it, he's looking at decades in federal prison. Elena met Arya's eyes directly. But I can't prove it without your help. I need the evidence you've gathered. The Phoenix asset management contracts, the shell company financial records, the documentation of how your credentials were compromised. All of it. Most of that evidence was obtained illegally. I know. Which is why I can't use it directly in an SEC prosecution, but I can use it as a roadmap. You show me where to look, and I'll get the same evidence through legal means. Subpoenas, court orders, official requests, everything by the book. It made sense. Too much sense. Arya wanted desperately to believe this was real, that someone in a position of authority was finally listening. How do I know you're not just trying to get me to incriminate myself? Elena smiled slightly. You don't. You have to make a choice. Trust that I'm telling the truth, or walk away and hope your next option is better. She closed her tablet. Ms. Bennett, I've been doing this job for 12 years. I've seen every kind of financial fraud you can imagine. And I've learned to recognize the difference between criminals trying to cover their tracks and innocent people fighting for their lives. You're the latter. That's not evidence. No, it's not. But it's enough for me to take your allegations seriously, which is more than the FBI's done from what I hear. Elena leaned forward. Here's what I'm offering. You give me everything you have. I'll launch a full SEC investigation into Richard Carmichael and his activities across all the companies where he has board positions. If your allegations are true, if the evidence holds up, we'll prosecute him. And when we do, the FBI's case against you falls apart. Because you can't be guilty of embezzling money that was actually stolen by someone else. And if the evidence doesn't hold up, then you're in the same position you're in now, facing federal charges with no good defense. Elena's expression softened. I know it's not a perfect solution, but it's the best offer you're going to get. Arya looked across the coffee shop to where Noah sat. He was watching carefully, his body tense, ready to intervene if needed. She thought about everything they'd been through in the past 2 weeks. The break-in, the chase, the constant fear, the slow gathering of evidence that might not be enough to save her. This was a risk, maybe the biggest one yet. But at this point, what did she have to lose? Okay, she said, I'll give you what I have, but I want something in return. What? Protection. Not witness protection, but actual security. Someone's been threatening me, following me. If I'm going to help you bring down Richard Carmichael, I need to know I'm not going to end up dead before we get to trial. Elena considered it. I can arrange protective surveillance, not 24/7, but regular check-ins and monitoring. Would that work? It'll have to. They spent the next 90 minutes going through everything. Arya shared the files Noah had downloaded from Bennett Industries servers, the Phoenix asset management contracts, the email exchanges between Martin and Richard. She explained the pattern of vendor relationships across multiple companies, the shell company money trails, The systematic fraud that had been disguised as legitimate business. Elena took notes, asked detailed questions, and cross-referenced everything against her own investigation's findings. By the time they finished, the coffee shop was preparing to close. "This is good work," Elena said, packing up her materials. "Really good. We'll start issuing subpoenas tomorrow morning. Richard won't know what hit him." "What about the FBI warrant for my arrest?" "That's outside my jurisdiction. You'll still need to turn yourself in eventually, but if you can hold out for a few more days, until we have preliminary findings from our investigation, it might help your case." "A few more days of being a fugitive. I know it's not ideal. But Ms. Bennett, you've gotten this far. Don't give up now." After Elena left, Noah came over to the table. "So? Legitimate or trap?" "I think it was legitimate. She knew things about the stock manipulation that we hadn't uncovered yet. Details that only someone actually investigating this would know." "That's good." Noah sat down heavily. "Because I was about 10 seconds away from tackling her if she tried to arrest you." "My hero." Arya smiled despite everything. "What now?" "Now we find somewhere to sleep that isn't Sarah's house, since we've definitely overstayed our welcome there. Tomorrow we wait to see if the SEC actually follows through. And we hope that Richard doesn't realize we're closing in until it's too late." They left the coffee shop separately, met 3 blocks away, and walked toward the train station. The evening air was cool, the city settling into its nighttime rhythm. For the first time in weeks, Arya felt like maybe, possibly, they had a chance. That feeling lasted exactly 3 more blocks. They heard the footsteps before they saw the people. 3 men, walking fast, coming up behind them. Noah grabbed Arya's arm, pulled her into a run. Behind them, the footsteps accelerated. Not police. Police would have announced themselves. These were the same kind of people who'd ambushed them at the park. Richard's people. They ran through the crowds, dodging pedestrians and street vendors. One of the men was shouting into a phone, coordinating. This wasn't random. They'd been waiting, watching for Arya to emerge from the coffee shop. The meeting with Elena had been compromised before it even started. Noah pulled her down a side street, then into an alley. They climbed a fire escape, crossed a roof, dropped down into a different alley on the other side. The footsteps fell back, but Arya could still hear voices echoing through the urban canyon. They made it to the train station, merged into a crowd of commuters, and boarded the first train that arrived. Only when the doors closed and the train started moving did Arya let herself breathe. "They knew where we'd be," she said, keeping her voice low. "How did they know?" Noah's face was grim. "Either Elena told them, or they've been tracking your phone this whole time despite all our precautions." "You think Elena set us up?" "I think we can't trust anyone. Not completely. Not until this is over." The train rattled through the tunnel, carrying them away from the coffee shop, away from the chase, away from whatever trap had been waiting. Arya leaned against the window, watching the darkness flash by, and realized that Noah was right. They were truly alone in this now. Every ally was potentially a threat. Every offered hand might be pulling them toward disaster instead of salvation. And somewhere in the city, Richard Carmichael was planning his next move, confident that he'd already won. But he hadn't won yet. Not while Arya was still free, still fighting, still refusing to accept the narrative he'd built around her guilt. Tomorrow, the SEC would begin its investigation. Tomorrow, the walls might finally start closing in on Richard instead of her. Tomorrow, everything might change. She just had to survive until then. They spent the night in a motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that didn't ask for ID and accepted cash. Noah had insisted on 2 rooms, but Arya couldn't shake the feeling that walls wouldn't protect them from whatever was coming. She sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, phone in hand, watching the news coverage of her own manhunt. The footage from the park meeting with Martin had been released exactly as Noah predicted, but it had been edited so carefully that Arya barely recognized herself. The video showed her approaching Martin aggressively, shouting something the audio didn't capture, then lunging at him before the camera cut away. The narrative was clear. Violent, unstable CEO attacks former colleague in desperate attempt to intimidate witnesses. Former executive Arya Bennett, already facing federal fraud charges, is now wanted for assault, the anchor said with that particular blend of concern and excitement that TV news had perfected. Authorities warn she may be dangerous and should not be approached by the public. Dangerous. The word felt absurd and terrifying at the same time. Her phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. I can't help you if you won't help yourself. Please, Arya, turn yourself in before this gets worse. Before it gets worse. As if there was somewhere lower to fall. A knock on the adjoining door between the rooms. Noah's voice, quiet but urgent. You awake? She opened the door. He was still fully dressed, his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. We need to leave. Now. What happened? Elena Vasquez doesn't exist. At least, not as an SEC analyst. He held up his phone, showing a search result. I've been digging since we got here. There's no Elena Vasquez in the SEC's Division of Enforcement. The ID badge she showed you was fake. Good fake, but fake. Arya felt the floor tilt. Then who was she? Someone working for Richard, would be my guess. The whole meeting was designed to find out what evidence we had and where we were staying. That's why those men were waiting when we left. They knew exactly where to look. But she knew things about the stock manipulation investigation. Details that could have been fed to her by someone with actual SEC connections. Or she could have made it up based on publicly available stock data. Either way, we gave her everything. Every piece of evidence we had, she now knows about. Noah's jaw was tight. We've been played again. Arya grabbed her jacket, her few possessions. Where do we go? Out of Chicago. We've been circling the same neighborhoods for 2 weeks. They know this territory better than we do. We need to get somewhere they won't expect. Like where? I have a cabin. Upstate Wisconsin, about 4 hours from here. My uncle left it to me when he died. It's remote, no internet, barely any cell service. If we can get there without being followed, we can regroup, figure out our next move. They left through the motel's rear exit, abandoning Noah's car, too easy to track, and walking 6 blocks to a 24-hour rental place. Noah used cash and a fake name, something he'd done before based on how smoothly he handled it. Arya didn't ask questions. The drive north was silent for the first hour, both of them watching for headlights that followed too long, cars that took the same exits. By the time they crossed into Wisconsin, some of the tension had eased. Tell me about your son, Arya said, needing to think about something other than the disaster their investigation had become. Noah glanced at her, surprised. Jake? He's 5. Obsessed with dinosaurs and anything that involves making a mess. Probably eating cereal for dinner right now because his mother can't cook to save her life. You miss him. Every day. But he's safer with her right now. If Richard's people came after me through Jake, he didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. I'm sorry for dragging you into this, for putting your relationship with your son at risk. You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this. Noah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. When I won custody of Jake, I promised myself I'd never let him grow up thinking the world was a place where powerful people always win and regular people just have to accept it. This case, helping you, it's about keeping that promise. That's a lot of weight to put on one fraud investigation. Maybe. But if we pull this off, if we actually take down Richard Carmichael and prove you're innocent, then I get to tell Jake that sometimes the good guys win, that standing up for what's right actually matters. And if we don't pull it off? Noah was quiet for a long moment. Then I get to tell him I tried, which is better than the alternative. They arrived at the cabin around 4 a.m. It was exactly as Noah had described, isolated, surrounded by trees, a dirt road the only access point. The interior was dusty and cold, but there was running water and a wood stove. Noah got a fire going while Arya explored the small space. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen that looked frozen in 1987, a living room with furniture that had seen better decades. It's not much, Noah said, but it's off the grid. No way to track us here unless they physically follow us, and we were careful. Arya sat on the ancient couch, feeling exhaustion catch up with her all at once. What do we do now? We gave everything to a fake SEC agent. Richard knows what evidence we have. He'll be scrubbing his tracks, covering his connections, making sure nothing we found can be used against him. Not necessarily. He knows we have evidence, but he doesn't know what we've done with it. For all he knows, we made copies, sent files to journalists, uploaded everything to cloud storage. Noah sat across from her. And here's the thing. We did send it to journalists. Jennifer Martinez at the Wall Street Journal has everything. Even if Richard tries to cover his tracks now, she's already digging into it independently. She said she couldn't publish without better sourcing. She said that yesterday. A lot can change in a day. Noah pulled out his laptop. I've been monitoring the news feeds. The Journal published a story 2 hours ago. Questions surround Bennett Industries' fraud case. It's not a full expose, but it lays out the alternative theory, mentions the Phoenix asset management connections, the pattern across multiple companies. It's getting traction. Arya read the article on his screen. Jennifer had been careful, framing everything as allegations and questions rather than facts. But the implications were clear enough that anyone reading it would have doubts about the official narrative. "This helps," Arya said, "but it's not enough. We need something definitive, something that proves Richard's involvement beyond reasonable doubt. We need Martin to talk, for real this time, not another setup." Noah closed the laptop. "He's the weak link. Richard might be willing to go down fighting, but Martin struck me as someone who'd flip if he thought it would save his own skin. How do we get to him when we're hiding in the woods, and he's protected by Richard's lawyers? We make him think he needs us more than he needs Richard." Noah leaned forward. "Martin's Thursday appointments, the ones Rebecca mentioned. What if those aren't business meetings? What if there's something personal, something vulnerable? A therapist, a doctor, a support group? So we find out where he goes and leverage it against him. We find out where he goes and offer him a deal. Protection from Richard in exchange for testimony against him." Noah's expression was grim. "I know it's ugly. I know it makes us not much better than them. But Arya, we're running out of options and we're running out of time." She thought about it. About Martin's betrayal. About the fake evidence and the edited videos and the systematic destruction of her life. About 18 months of lies and the smug confidence he'd had when setting his trap in the park. "How do we find out where he goes on Thursdays?" Noah smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Same way we found everything else. We follow him." They spent the next day planning. Noah had contacts in Chicago, people he'd worked with during his forensic accounting cases, investigators and researchers who owed him favors. He made calls from a disposable phone, speaking in careful code, never mentioning names directly. By evening, they had a plan. One of Noah's contacts would tail Martin this Thursday, document where he went, who he met with. Once they knew what leverage they had, they'd approach him with an offer he couldn't refuse. "This is assuming he doesn't just call the police the second we make contact," Arya said. "He won't, because we'll make it clear that if he does, we release everything we have to every journalist we can find. He might survive Richard's wrath, but he won't survive public exposure as the architect of a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme." Noah checked his watch. "Thursday is 3 days away. We stay here, keep our heads down, and wait." 3 days felt like 3 years. Arya paced the small cabin, unable to sit still, unable to turn off the constant churning of her thoughts. At night, she barely slept. During the day, she watched the news coverage of the manhunt for her, the expanding speculation about Richard Carmichael's involvement, the slowly shifting narrative. Patricia called repeatedly. Arya didn't answer. She didn't know what to say to her lawyer anymore. Every conversation ended the same way. Turn yourself in, stop running, let the system work. But the system had already failed her. The system had convicted her before she'd ever had a chance to defend herself. On Wednesday evening, Noah got the call he'd been waiting for. His contact had been watching Martin for 2 days, learning his patterns, identifying vulnerabilities. "He goes to a clinic on the north side," Noah said, hanging up. "Addiction counseling. He's been attending sessions every Thursday for 7 months. Arya felt something complicated twist in her chest. Martin Price, the composed CFO who'd betrayed her so thoroughly, was fighting demons of his own. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it humanized him in a way that made what they were about to do feel even more ruthless. "What kind of addiction?" My contact didn't get details. Could be alcohol, pills, gambling, doesn't matter. What matters is it's something he's kept hidden from Richard and the board, something he wouldn't want exposed. So we blackmail him. We offer him a choice. Help us, or we make his struggles public. Noah met her eyes. "I know how this sounds. I know what it makes us. But Arya, we're trying to stop someone who's committed hundreds of millions in fraud, destroyed your life, and threatened to kill you. We don't have the luxury of playing fair anymore." She knew he was right, hated that he was right. "When do we approach him?" "Tomorrow, after his session. He'll be vulnerable, emotional, less likely to call for help immediately. We get him alone, make our pitch, and pray he sees reason." That night, Arya stood outside the cabin and looked up at the stars. They were brighter here than in the city, unclouded by light pollution. She tried to remember the last time she'd looked at the stars and felt anything other than fear and exhaustion. Tried to remember what her life had been like before the headlines, before the betrayal, before everything fell apart. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else. Noah came out to join her, 2 mugs of instant coffee in his hands. Couldn't sleep either? Haven't really slept in weeks. She took one of the mugs. Noah, what happens if this doesn't work? If Martin refuses to talk, if Richard finds us first, if we can't prove any of this, then we've lost. And you go to prison for crimes you didn't commit, and I probably join you for all the laws we've broken trying to prove your innocence. He sipped his coffee. But we haven't lost yet, and I don't intend to start planning for defeat when we're this close. You really think we're close? I think we're closer than Richard wants us to be. Otherwise, he wouldn't be working so hard to stop us. Noah turned to look at her directly. Arya, I've worked fraud cases for 8 years. I've seen guilty people, and I've seen innocent people. And I can tell the difference. You didn't do this, which means somewhere, somehow, there's proof. We just have to find it before they find us. Thursday came too fast. They drove back to Chicago in the pre-dawn darkness, arriving in the city just as morning rush hour began. Noah's contact had provided the clinic's address and Martin's schedule, session from 3 to 4:30 p.m., then usually a walk through the nearby park before he returned to his car. They waited in that park, sitting on a bench with a clear view of the clinic's entrance. Arya wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, her hair tucked up, trying to look like just another person enjoying the autumn afternoon. Noah had a newspaper open, playing the part of someone killing time. At 4:37, Martin emerged. He looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. His shoulders were hunched, his pace slow. Whatever he'd discussed in his session, it had taken something out of him. He walked into the park, heading for a secluded path that wound through a grove of trees. Noah and Arya followed at a distance, closing the gap as Martin moved further from the street. When they were alone, deep enough into the park that no one would overhear, Noah called out, "Martin, we need to talk." Martin spun around, his face going white when he recognized them. You can't be here. If Richard finds out..." "Richard's not going to find out unless you tell him." Arya stepped forward, removing her sunglasses. "And you're not going to tell him, because we have something you need, and you have something we need." "I'm calling the police." Martin reached for his phone. "Go ahead," Noah said calmly. "But before you do, ask yourself what happens when we release the information that Martin Price, CFO of Bennett Industries, has been in addiction counseling for 7 months. How's the board going to react to that? How's Richard?" Martin's hand froze. "You wouldn't." "We would. We will, unless you give us a reason not to." Arya kept her voice steady, fighting the revulsion she felt at weaponizing someone's struggle with addiction. "We know you're going to meetings, Martin. We know you've been fighting something for months while pretending to be the composed executive. That takes strength, but it also means you have something to lose. This is extortion. This is survival. You helped Richard frame me for fraud. You stole my company and tried to send me to prison. So yes, I'm willing to play dirty to get my life back." Arya took another step closer. "But here's the thing. We don't have to be enemies. We can help each other." "How?" Martin's voice cracked slightly. "You testify against Richard. Tell the FBI everything, how he planned the fraud, how he used Phoenix Asset Management to access my credentials, how the money was laundered and reinvested. Give them documentation, recordings, anything you have. In exchange, we don't expose your counseling, and we make sure the prosecutors know you cooperated. Maybe you get a reduced sentence. Maybe you avoid prison entirely." "Richard will kill me. Richard's going to bury you anyway," Noah said. "You think he's going to let you walk away from this? You're a loose end, Martin, the same as Arya. The only question is whether you go down with him or save yourself while you can." Martin looked between them, and Arya could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Fear and self-preservation warring with whatever loyalty he still felt toward Richard. "I don't have proof," he said finally. "Not the kind you're thinking. Richard's too careful. Everything was verbal, nothing in writing that directly implicates him." "Then wear a wire. Get him talking. Make him incriminate himself." Arya felt a surge of desperate hope. "You said yourself Richard's planning something, that he wanted me dead before trial. Get him to say it on tape, and we have everything we need. You're asking me to risk my life. We're offering you a chance to save it. Noah pulled out a burner phone. This number connects to a FBI agent who's been investigating corporate fraud for 15 years. His name is David Chen. He's clean, not connected to Richard, not part of the prosecution team going after Arya. You call him, you tell him you want to talk, and we make this happen. Martin stared at the phone like it was a snake. I need time to think. You don't have time. We don't have time. Arya's voice rose despite her effort to stay calm. Martin, please. You owe me this. After everything you did, everything you took from me, you owe me the truth. Something in Martin's expression shifted. Guilt, maybe? Or just exhaustion from carrying the weight of what he'd done. I'll think about it, he said quietly, but I'm not promising anything. Think fast. We'll be in touch tomorrow. Noah handed him the burner phone. And Martin, if you tell Richard about this conversation, if you warn him we're coming, we release everything. Your counseling, your role in the fraud, everything. You'll lose your job, your reputation, and probably your freedom. Your choice. They left him standing in the park, the phone clutched in his hand, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Back in the rental car, Arya let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Do you think he'll do it? 50-50. He's scared of Richard, but he's also scared of going to prison. If we can tip that balance, make him more afraid of the consequences of staying loyal. Noah trailed off. We'll know soon enough. They drove to a different motel, this one in the suburbs, and waited. The burner phone Noah had given Martin had a tracking chip embedded in it, not sophisticated enough to give them real-time location, but enough to tell them if the phone was turned on and used. At 7:23 p.m., the tracker pinged. Martin had turned on the phone. At 7:31, it pinged again, a call, lasting 8 minutes. He's talking to someone, Noah said, watching his laptop screen. Could be the FBI agent, could be Richard, could be his lawyer. How do we find out which? We wait. If he called David Chen, Chen will reach out to us. We gave him our contact information as part of the deal. They waited through the evening, through dinner neither of them ate, through the late news coverage that continued to paint Arya as a dangerous fugitive. At 10:47, Noah's phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He answered on speaker. Hello? This is David Chen, FBI. I just got a very interesting call from a Martin Price claiming he wants to cooperate in exchange for immunity. He says you can verify his claims. Is that true? Noah and Arya locked eyes. It had worked. Martin had actually called. It's true, Noah said. Martin Price was part of a conspiracy with Richard Carmichael to commit securities fraud across multiple companies. He has information about how Arya Bennett was framed, how the fraud was executed, and how the money was laundered. That's a significant allegation. I'm going to need evidence, not just testimony from someone looking to save their own skin. Martin can get you evidence. He has access to Richard's communications, his financial records, his plans. If you wire him up, get him to talk to Richard on tape, you'll have everything you need for prosecution. David Chen was quiet for a moment. You understand that what you're describing is an active investigation that requires official authorization, cooperation agreements, and legal oversight. I can't just send a civilian in with a wire based on a phone call. Then do it officially. Drop the cooperation agreement, bring in the prosecutors, do whatever you need to do. But move fast because Richard Carmichael is already trying to cover his tracks. Every day you wait is another day he destroys evidence. Where's Arya Bennett? The question hung in the air. Noah looked at Arya, letting her make the call. I'm here, she said. I'm willing to turn myself in if it helps move this investigation forward, but I want guarantees. I want protection from Richard's people, and I want Martin's cooperation formalized before I walk into FBI custody. I can't make those guarantees without authorization from my superiors. But I can tell you this. If Martin Price's information is credible, if he can provide evidence of the conspiracy you're alleging, it changes everything. The case against you falls apart if we can prove someone else committed the fraud and framed you for it. How long until you know if his information is credible? Give me 48 hours, I'll debrief Martin, verify what he's claiming, and determine if we can move forward with a cooperation agreement. In the meantime, Ms. Bennett, I strongly suggest you find a safe place to stay. The warrant for your arrest is still active, and I can't protect you from local law enforcement if they locate you. Understood. After the call ended, Arya and Noah sat in silence for a long moment. This is it. Arya said finally. This is the break we needed. Maybe. If Martin doesn't get cold feet. If Richard doesn't find out. If the FBI actually follows through. Noah ran his hands through his hair. There are a lot of ifs still in play. But it's more than we had yesterday. Yeah, it is. They spent the next 2 days in the motel room, barely leaving except for food. Noah monitored the news obsessively, watching for any sign that Richard knew Martin had flipped. Arya tried to prepare herself for what came next: arrest, jail, the possibility that even with Martin's cooperation, she might not be vindicated. On the second day, David Chen called again. We have a cooperation agreement with Martin Price. He's provided preliminary information that corroborates your version of events. Documents showing Richard Carmichael's involvement with Phoenix Asset Management, communication records between them discussing the fraud scheme, financial transfers that support the money laundering allegations. Arya felt tears burning behind her eyes. So you believe me? I believe there's enough evidence to warrant a full investigation into Richard Carmichael and to reconsider the charges against you. The U.S. Attorney's Office is reviewing everything now. They'll make a determination about whether to proceed with your prosecution or drop the charges. How long? Could be days, could be weeks. The system moves slowly, even when we have good evidence. Chen's voice softened slightly. Ms. Bennett, I know this has been hell for you. I've read your file, seen what you've been through. For what it's worth, I think you got a raw deal, and I'm going to do everything I can to make this right. Thank you, Arya whispered. In the meantime, Martin's agreed to wear a wire when he meets with Richard tomorrow. We're setting it up now. If we can get Richard to incriminate himself on tape, discussing the fraud or threatening Martin or anything that shows consciousness of guilt, it'll seal the case. What if Richard suspects something? Then we'll have to rely on the documentary evidence Martin's already provided. It's strong, but a recorded confession would be better. Chen paused. One more thing. We're going to need you to come in for an official interview, to go on the record with your account of what happened. Can you do that? Arya looked at Noah. He nodded. When? Tomorrow. 2 p.m., Federal Building in Chicago. Bring your lawyer. After the call, Arya sat on the motel bed and let herself cry for the first time since this nightmare began. Not tears of despair, but something closer to exhausted relief. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time, the ending might not be the one Richard had planned. Noah sat beside her, not touching, just present. We did it, she said through tears. We actually did it. Not yet. Richard's still free, and you're still wanted. But we're close. Closer than I thought we'd get when I showed up at your door 3 weeks ago. Has it only been 3 weeks? Feels like a lifetime. Feels like 3 lifetimes. Noah smiled slightly. But if we pull this off, if we actually take down Richard Carmichael and clear your name, it'll be worth every terrible moment. And if we don't? Then we'll have tried, which is more than most people can say. That evening, Arya called Patricia for the first time in days. I'm turning myself in tomorrow, she said before her lawyer could start lecturing. 2 p.m. at the Federal Building. The FBI wants to interview me officially. Patricia was silent for so long, Arya thought the call had dropped. What changed? She asked finally. Martin Price flipped. He's cooperating with the FBI, providing evidence against Richard Carmichael. They're investigating the fraud as a conspiracy that I wasn't part of. Martin's cooperating. Patricia said it like she was testing the words, seeing if they made sense. Arya, do you understand what this means? If Martin testifies that you weren't involved, if the FBI finds evidence that you were framed, they might drop the charges. They will drop the charges. They have to. Without evidence of your involvement, they have no case. Patricia's voice cracked slightly. You're going to be okay. After everything, you might actually be okay. I want you there tomorrow, when I turn myself in. I'll be there. And Arya, I'm sorry I doubted you. I'm sorry I pushed so hard for you to give up. You were doing your job, trying to protect me. I should have tried harder to believe you. The next morning, Arya woke early and took a long shower in the motel's mediocre bathroom. She dressed carefully in the one professional outfit she'd been carrying: black pants, a white blouse, a blazer that was wrinkled but acceptable. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Thinner, harder, aged by stress and fear, but still standing, still fighting. Noah drove her to this Federal Building. They arrived 20 minutes early and sat in the parking lot, neither speaking. You don't have to come in with me, Arya said finally. Yes, I do. We started this together. We finish it together. Noah, you've risked everything for me. Your safety, your relationship with your son, your freedom. You don't owe me anything more. This isn't about owing. This is about... He stopped, searching for words. When I lost custody of Jake, when everyone believed my ex-wife's lies about me being a bad father, I felt like I was drowning, like the whole world had decided who I was, and nothing I said or did could change their minds. But I kept fighting because I had to, because the alternative was accepting a lie as truth. I know the feeling. So this case helping you, it's not just about proving your innocence. It's about proving that fighting matters, that you can stand up against people with more money and more power and more connections. And sometimes, if you're smart enough and stubborn enough and lucky enough, you can win. He looked at her directly. I need to see this through. For you, but also for me. And for Jake, so I can tell him someday that his dad did something that mattered. Arya reached over and took his hand. He squeezed back, and they sat like that for a moment. Two people who'd been through hell together and somehow come out the other side. Okay, she said, let's finish this. Patricia was waiting inside the federal building, along with David Chen and two other FBI agents. They led Arya to an interview room, different from the one she'd been in before, but just as gray and impersonal. Before we begin, Chen said, I want you to know that Martin Price met with Richard Carmichael this morning. He was wearing a wire. We have approximately 40 minutes of recorded conversation. Arya's pulse jumped. Did Richard incriminate himself? Judge for yourself. Chen pulled out a digital recorder and pressed play. Richard's voice filled the room, crisp and familiar and utterly damning. You need to hold your nerve, Martin. The investigation into Arya is proceeding exactly as planned. The prosecutors are confident they can secure a conviction. But the news stories, the questions about Phoenix asset management, noise, nothing we can't handle. As long as you stick to the script, as long as you don't deviate from the plan, we're fine. And if Arya keeps digging, if she finds more evidence, she won't. We've covered our tracks too well. And if she gets too close, we'll handle it, permanently, if necessary. A pause. Then Martin's voice, shaky but determined. You're talking about killing her. I'm talking about protecting our interests, which includes making sure certain inconvenient people don't have the opportunity to testify. Richard's tone was casual, discussing murder like a minor business decision. Don't worry, Martin, you'll be insulated from it, just like you've been insulated from everything else. I never signed up for this. For fraud, yes. For stealing her company, fine, but not for killing people. You signed up for whatever it takes to win. That's how this game works. You think the money we've made came from playing nice? Richard's voice hardened. You're in too deep to develop a conscience now. So you're going to smile, you're going to cooperate with my lawyers, and you're going to keep your mouth shut. Because if you don't, I'll make sure you go down harder than Arya ever could. The recording continued, Richard laying out his plans to discredit Arya further, to pressure the prosecutors to move faster on charges, to eliminate any threat to his control of the companies he'd systematically looted. By the time it ended, Arya was shaking. Chen turned off the recorder. Richard Carmichael was arrested 2 hours ago. He's being charged with conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and solicitation of murder. The evidence is overwhelming. He's not walking away from this. And Martin? He's cooperating fully. In exchange for his testimony, the prosecutors have agreed to reduce charges and a recommendation for minimum sentencing. He'll serve time, but not the decades he'd face otherwise. Arya closed her eyes, letting it sink in. It was over. Richard had been caught, his confession recorded, his conspiracy exposed. What about me? She asked. All charges against you are being dropped. The U.S. Attorney's Office has reviewed the evidence and determined that you were a victim of the fraud, not a perpetrator. Your name will be cleared, your assets unfrozen, your reputation restored as much as possible. Patricia was crying. Arya felt like she should be crying too, but instead she just felt numb. 3 weeks of running, hiding, fighting, and now it was over in a moment. One recording, one arrest, and everything changed. There will be a press conference this afternoon, Chen continued. The U.S. Attorney will announce the arrest and the exoneration. You're welcome to attend, though you're not required to. I'll be there, Arya said. I want everyone who called me a criminal to hear the truth. The press conference was held at 5 p.m., carried live on every major news network. The U.S. attorney stood at a podium, flanked by FBI agents, and delivered the statement that demolished Richard Carmichael's carefully constructed narrative. Today, we have arrested Richard Carmichael on multiple charges related to a sophisticated securities fraud scheme spanning several years and multiple corporations. Evidence shows that Mr. Carmichael, working with co-conspirator Martin Price, systematically defrauded companies of hundreds of millions of dollars while framing innocent executives for the crimes. Among those wrongly accused was Aria Bennett, former CEO of Bennett Industries. All charges against Ms. Bennett have been dropped, and we owe her an apology for the ordeal she's endured. The reporters erupted with questions, but Aria barely heard them. She stood at the back of the room with Noah, watching her vindication unfold in real time. "How does it feel?" Noah asked quietly. "Surreal. Like I'm going to wake up and find out it was a dream. It's real. You're free. You won." "We won," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." On the television screens, the news channels were already updating their coverage. The headlines that had destroyed her were being replaced with new ones. CEO exonerated in fraud case. Billionaire investor arrested in conspiracy. Bennett Industries scandal takes shocking turn. Aria's phone started ringing. Friends who'd abandoned her, colleagues who'd turned their backs, board members who'd voted to remove her, all of them suddenly eager to reconnect, to offer apologies, to pretend they'd never doubted her. She turned off her phone. "What now?" Noah asked. "Now I figure out who I am after all this. Whether I even want to go back to Bennett Industries. Whether I want to rebuild or start over or just walk away entirely." Aria looked at him. "What about you? Back to your son, back to your normal life." "Yeah. Jake needs his dad, and I've been away too long." Noah smiled. "But I'm glad I was here. Glad I got to help. Glad I got to know you." "I'm glad too." They stood together, watching the press conference wind down, watching the beginning of what would surely be a massive legal and financial reckoning for Richard Carmichael and everyone connected to his fraud. Outside, the sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the city, Richard was sitting in a jail cell, facing the destruction of everything he'd built. Somewhere else, Martin was preparing for his testimony, living with the consequences of his choices. And Aria Bennett, for the first time in 3 weeks, was free. Not free of scars, not free of the trauma of what she'd endured, not free of the hard questions about her future, but free of the accusations, free of the lies, free to rebuild her life on her own terms. She'd survived the worst betrayal imaginable and come out the other side. Not unscathed, but unbroken. And that, she thought, was victory enough. The weeks that followed the press conference felt stranger than the weeks of running. Aria had expected vindication to feel like victory, like crossing a finish line with arms raised. Instead, it felt like standing in the wreckage of a building that had collapsed around her, trying to figure out which pieces were worth salvaging. The media circus was relentless. Every network wanted an exclusive interview. Publishing houses offered book deals. Streaming services floated documentary proposals. Everyone wanted a piece of her story now that she was the wronged hero instead of the fallen villain. She turned them all down. Patricia helped her navigate the legal aftermath, the restoration of her assets, the civil suits against Richard and the board members who'd enabled him, the slow bureaucratic process of having her name formally cleared from every database and filing that had labeled her a criminal. Bennett Industries' board reached out through lawyers, offering reinstatement as CEO, with full back pay and a public apology. Aria met with them exactly once, in the same conference room where they'd voted to remove her. Sandra Yoshida, who'd been so quick to condemn her, now looked uncomfortable. "Ms. Bennett, we owe you an apology. We acted on incomplete information and allowed ourselves to be manipulated by Richard Carmichael. The board would like to offer you full reinstatement and a renewed contract with significantly improved terms." Aria looked around the table at the faces that had turned against her so easily. Some looked genuinely remorseful. Others just looked scared of the lawsuits she could file. "No," she said simply. "Ms. Bennett, please understand, we were deceived. Richard presented evidence that seemed ironclad. We had a fiduciary duty to act. You had a duty to trust the person who built this company. You had a duty to investigate before destroying someone's reputation. You had a duty to at least ask me directly instead of believing the worst immediately. Arya stood up. I don't want your apology, and I don't want my job back. I'm done with Bennett Industries. She walked out before they could respond, and it felt better than any victory in that boardroom ever had. Outside, Noah was waiting in his car. He'd stayed in Chicago longer than he'd planned, helping her through the immediate aftermath, making sure she wasn't alone during the worst of the media frenzy. His son Jake had come to visit twice, a bright-eyed 5-year-old who told Arya seriously that his daddy was a hero who helped people. How'd it go? Noah asked as she got in the car. I quit. Officially, permanently, completely. Good. That place was toxic long before Richard got involved. He pulled out of the parking lot. What now? Now I figure out what I actually want to do with my life instead of what I thought I was supposed to do. Arya leaned back against the seat. I built Bennett Industries because I wanted to prove I could, that a woman could start a consulting firm and compete with the old boys network and win. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about helping companies and started being about the empire, about growth for growth's sake, about power. That's not a crime. No, but it's not a life either. I worked 18-hour days for 8 years, and for what? So Richard Carmichael could steal it all and frame me for his crimes? She looked out the window at the Chicago skyline. I want something different now, something that matters more than quarterly earnings and market share. Any ideas what that looks like? Not yet, but I have time to figure it out. Noah drove her back to Patricia's apartment where she'd been staying since the charges were dropped. The protesters were gone now, replaced occasionally by supporters who wanted to shake her hand or express their admiration for how she'd fought back. Arya found both reactions equally uncomfortable. I'm heading back to Milwaukee tomorrow, Noah said as they pulled up. Jake's birthday is this weekend. I've already missed too many. He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him. Noah turned to face her. Arya, I know these past few weeks have been a nightmare. But for what it's worth, I'm glad our paths crossed. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. I didn't feel strong. Most of the time, I felt terrified. Courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. He smiled. You did that every single day. That's strength. Arya felt tears threatening and blinked them back. Thank you. For everything. For believing me when no one else did. For risking your life and your freedom to help a stranger. I don't know how to repay that. You don't repay kindness. You pass it forward. Noah reached over and squeezed her hand. Take care of yourself. And if you ever need anything, you know how to reach me. After he left, Arya sat in Patricia's guest room and felt the loneliness settle in. She'd spent 3 weeks with Noah as her constant companion, and now the silence felt oppressive. She tried to remember what she used to do with her time before the scandal, before the company consumed everything. She couldn't remember. That person felt like a stranger. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't immediately recognize, then realized with a jolt was Rebecca Chen, Martin's former assistant. I saw the news. I'm so glad the truth came out. I'm sorry I didn't help more. If you ever need anything, please reach out. Arya stared at the message for a long time before responding. You helped more than you know. Thank you for taking that risk. Other messages followed in the coming days. James Morrison, the building operations manager who'd helped them break into Bennett Industries, checking to see if she was okay. Jennifer Martinez, the Wall Street Journal reporter, asking if Arya had reconsidered doing an interview. Even a few former colleagues who'd stayed silent during the scandal, now emerging to offer support. Each message was well-intentioned. Each one felt like a reminder of how alone she'd been when it mattered. The trial preparations for Richard Carmichael's prosecution dominated the news for months. Martin Price testified in preliminary hearings, laying out the conspiracy in meticulous detail. Richard's lawyers fought hard, trying to suppress evidence, trying to claim Martin was the true mastermind and Richard merely a dupe. But the recordings were damning, and the paper trail Martin had preserved was comprehensive. Arya was subpoenaed to testify at the grand jury hearing. She sat in a room with prosecutors and jurors and told her story from the beginning. The first morning she saw the headlines, the betrayal by people she trusted, the systematic destruction of her reputation. She kept her voice steady, her facts clear, but inside she was reliving every terrible moment. The grand jury indicted Richard on all counts. He was denied bail as a flight risk and spent the months before trial in federal custody. Arya felt no satisfaction in his imprisonment. She'd wanted justice, but seeing him destroyed didn't undo what he'd done to her. Martin Price pleaded guilty as part of his cooperation agreement and was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. At his sentencing, he asked to address the court. "I want to apologize to Arya Bennett," he said, his voice barely audible. "I betrayed her friendship and trust. I helped destroy her reputation and nearly destroyed her life. There's no excuse for what I did. I was weak and I was greedy and I let someone manipulate me into doing things I knew were wrong. I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life. I'm sorry. I know it's not enough, but I'm sorry." Arya watched from the gallery, feeling nothing. His apology didn't erase 18 months of lies. It didn't give her back the life she'd lost. It was just words, and words had proven themselves cheap. After the sentencing, Patricia approached her in the hallway. "You okay?" "I don't know what okay feels like anymore." "That's normal. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the perpetrators get punished." Patricia gestured toward her office. "I have something for you, not legal documents, just information you might want to have." In her office, Patricia pulled out a folder. "The board's civil attorneys reached out. They're willing to settle all claims against you for the damage to your reputation. The number they're offering is substantial." Arya looked at the figure written on the settlement offer. 8 figures. Enough money to never work again if she didn't want to. "They're scared of a jury trial," she said, terrified. "If you testify about what they put you through, if a jury hears how quickly they turned on you, the damages could be triple this amount." Patricia sat back. But a trial also means reliving everything publicly. Months of depositions and testimony. Every detail of your worst weeks examined under a microscope. You need to decide if it's worth it. Arya thought about it. About standing in front of a jury and recounting her humiliation. About seeing the board members squirm under cross-examination. About the vindication of a massive verdict. Then she thought about what Noah had said. About passing kindness forward instead of demanding repayment. "I'll settle," she said, "but I want half the money to go to a foundation. Something that helps people who've been wrongly accused who don't have the resources to fight back the way I did. Legal aid, investigative support, mental health services. That's a lot of money to give away. I have enough. More than enough. And maybe if something good comes out of this nightmare, it'll feel less pointless." Patricia smiled. "I'll draw up the terms." 6 months after the press conference that cleared her name, Arya stood in an empty office space in a neighborhood far from the gleaming towers of downtown Chicago. The space was modest, 3 rooms, exposed brick, windows that let in good light. Not an empire, just a place to work. She'd spent the intervening months figuring out what she actually wanted to do, not consulting for corporations chasing growth, not building another company that would consume her life. Something smaller, something human. The Bennett Foundation for the Wrongly Accused had been established with half the settlement money. Patricia helped her hire directors, set up the legal structure, establish the mission. They'd already taken on 3 cases, people whose lives had been destroyed by false accusations and who couldn't afford the kind of help Arya had needed. But the foundation was Patricia's domain. Arya wanted something different for herself. This office would be a different kind of consulting practice. Small businesses, nonprofits, organizations trying to do good work but struggling with the financial and operational pieces. She'd help them without trying to scale them into something unrecognizable. She'd work reasonable hours and take time off, and remember that life existed outside of conference rooms. She was standing in the empty space, imagining where the desks would go when someone knocked on the open door. Noah Hayes stood there, Jake on his shoulders, both of them grinning. "Noah? What are you doing here?" "Jake wanted to see the big city, and I wanted to see how you were doing." He set his son down, and Jake immediately ran to examine the empty space with the fascination only a 5-year-old could muster. "I'm doing okay. Better than okay, actually." Arya gestured around. "Starting over. Smaller this time. Smarter, I hope." "Looks good." Noah walked the perimeter of the space. "You hiring? Are you applying?" "Maybe. Jake starts kindergarten in the fall. His mom and I worked out a better custody arrangement. I get him weekdays, she gets weekends, which means I need work that's flexible enough to handle school pickup and sick days and all the chaos that comes with raising a kid." "And you think working for me would be flexible?" "I think working with you would be interesting. We made a pretty good team when we were investigating fraud and running from federal agents. Might be nice to see what we can do when we're not actively committing crimes." Arya laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in months. "That's a low bar. I'm a simple man with simple goals." Noah's expression turned more serious. "But honestly, I've been doing freelance forensic accounting since we wrapped your case. It pays okay, but it's lonely. And I keep thinking about what we built together. That kind of partnership doesn't come along often. What would you even do here? I'm not planning to investigate conspiracies as a regular business model. Financial analysis for nonprofits, fraud prevention for small businesses, due diligence for organizations that can't afford the big consulting firms." He shrugged. "Same skills, different application. And I could work part-time, keep Jake as my priority, but still do work that matters." Arya considered it. She'd been planning to start this venture alone, to prove to herself that she could build something without losing herself in it. But maybe that was old thinking. Maybe the lesson from everything she'd been through wasn't that she needed to be independent, but that she needed to choose her partnerships more carefully. "Okay," she said. "Let's try it. Part-time, flexible hours, and if it doesn't work, we part as friends." "Deal." Noah stuck out his hand. She shook it, and something in her chest loosened slightly. She wasn't alone anymore. She had a partner who'd proven himself when it mattered most. Jake ran back over, tugging on Noah's jacket. "Daddy, can we get pizza?" "We absolutely can get pizza. Arya, you want to join us? Jake's been practicing his dinosaur facts and he's dying to tell someone new." "I would love to hear about dinosaurs." They left the empty office and walked into the afternoon sunshine, Jake chattering excitedly about velociraptors and their hunting strategies. Arya listened, contributed questions, and felt something approximating normalcy settle over her. The trial for Richard Carmichael began in early autumn. Arya attended most days, sitting in the gallery and watching the prosecution systematically dismantle his defense. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the financial documents, Martin's testimony, the paper trail connecting Richard to every aspect of the fraud. Richard's lawyers tried everything. They claimed Martin was the real mastermind. They suggested Arya had participated willingly and was now lying to save herself. They argued the recordings were taken out of context, that Richard's talk of handling Arya permanently was just aggressive business rhetoric. The jury didn't buy it. After 4 weeks of testimony, they deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Richard Carmichael, the venture capitalist who'd seemed untouchable, was sentenced to 32 years in federal prison. Arya felt nothing watching him being led away in handcuffs. No triumph, no satisfaction, no closure. He was going to prison, but that didn't give her back the 3 weeks she'd spent running for her life. It didn't erase the betrayal or the fear or the knowledge that people she'd trusted had been willing to destroy her. Justice had been served, but justice didn't heal wounds. It just made sure the people who'd inflicted them faced consequences. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Arya had avoided media attention for months, but today she'd agreed to make a statement. Patricia stood beside her, along with representatives from the foundation they'd established. Today, Richard Carmichael was held accountable for his crimes, Arya said into the microphones. He stole hundreds of millions of dollars. He destroyed lives and careers. He tried to send an innocent person to prison to cover his tracks. The guilty verdict doesn't undo the damage he caused, but it sends a message that fraud and corruption will not be tolerated, no matter how wealthy or connected the perpetrator. "Ms. Bennett, how do you feel about the verdict?" a reporter called out. Relieved, exhausted, ready to move forward. Arya took a breath. "What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. But it does happen, every day, to people who don't have the resources or support to fight back. That's why I've established the Bennett Foundation for the Wrongly Accused. We provide legal assistance, investigative support, and mental health services to people facing false accusations. Because everyone deserves the chance to prove their innocence, not just people who can afford expensive lawyers and private investigators." She took a few more questions, then Patricia shepherded her away from the crowd. They walked several blocks before either spoke. "How are you really feeling?" Patricia asked. "Like I can finally breathe." Arya stopped walking and looked up at the sky. "For the first time in a year, I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop. Richard's in prison. Martin's in prison. The charges against me are expunged. I can actually start living again instead of just surviving." "What does living look like?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." The new consulting practice opened quietly in November. No press releases, no big announcements, just a small sign on the door and a website that explained what they offered. Arya and Noah worked together 3 days a week, with Noah handling the other 2 days from home to be available for Jake. Their first client was a homeless shelter struggling with financial management. Arya helped them reorganize their budget and secure better terms with their suppliers. Noah identified several inefficiencies in their operations that, once corrected, saved them thousands of dollars annually. It was small work, unglamorous work, but it mattered to the people they helped. The second client was a community health clinic. The third was a small manufacturing company trying to expand without compromising their values. Each project was different. Each client brought unique challenges, and Arya found herself energized by the variety in ways she'd never been at Bennett Industries. She worked reasonable hours. She took weekends off. She had dinner with Patricia and other friends who'd stuck by her. She went to Jake's kindergarten play and watched Noah's terrible attempts at stage makeup turn his son into a somewhat horrifying tree. She even went on a few dates, though nothing serious developed. The men were nice enough, but they didn't understand what she'd been through. They saw the headlines and the vindication and assumed she'd moved on completely. They didn't see the nightmares she still had, or the moments of panic when she saw someone who looked like Martin or Richard, or the way she still checked over her shoulder constantly when walking alone. Noah understood, though. He'd been there. He knew the difference between being legally cleared and actually being free of the trauma. One evening, after they'd finished a particularly challenging client presentation, they sat in the office drinking cheap wine from paper cups and decompressing. "Can I ask you something personal?" Arya said. "Sure. Why did you really take my case? That first night when you showed up at my door, you said you knew what it was like to be wrongly accused, but there's more to it than that, isn't there?" Noah was quiet for a long moment. "My ex-wife's accusations during the custody battle. They weren't just about me being a bad father. She claimed I'd been abusive, emotionally, psychologically. None of it was true, but once those accusations were out there, people looked at me differently. Friends stopped calling, family members got distant. Even after I proved it was all fabricated, even after I won custody, some people still wondered if maybe there was some truth to it. I'm sorry. The point is, I know what it's like to have your character assassinated. To watch people you thought knew you decide that you're capable of terrible things based on someone else's lies. And I swore that if I ever had the chance to help someone in that situation, I would, no matter the cost." He looked at her. "You were that chance, and helping you, proving that someone wrongly accused could actually win, it helped me believe it was true. That I'd been right to keep fighting for Jake, that the system could work if you pushed hard enough." Do you really believe that? That the system works? I believe it can work if good people refuse to give up on it, but I also believe it fails more often than it succeeds. Noah refilled his paper cup. That's why what we're doing matters. The foundation, this practice, helping people who don't have power or money or connections. We're making the system work for people it usually ignores. Is it enough, though? We're helping a few dozen people when thousands face the same problems. We're helping more people than we were helping 6 months ago. That's progress. Noah smiled slightly. Arya, you spent 8 years building an empire. You don't have to save the world in your first year of building something new. Small impact is still impact. She knew he was right, but the old instincts were hard to shake. The drive to scale, to grow, to prove herself through the size of her success rather than the quality of it. I'm working on it, she said. The whole being satisfied with small victories thing, it's harder than it should be. Most worthwhile things are. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights through the office windows. A year ago, Arya had been CEO of a billion-dollar company with an apartment overlooking the same skyline. Now she was running a small consulting practice out of a modest office, helping nonprofits balance their books. She was happier now than she'd been then. Not happy in the uncomplicated way, not free of scars or doubts, but happier in a way that felt real and sustainable in hers. The holidays came and went. Arya spent Christmas with Patricia's family, feeling awkward and grateful in equal measure. She sent generous donations to the organization she'd worked with, not because she needed the tax deduction, but because she wanted to. Money had stopped being a scorecard and started being a tool, and that shift felt significant. In January, the Bennett Foundation held its first annual fundraiser. Arya gave a speech about her experience, about the importance of supporting people facing false accusations, about how justice shouldn't depend on wealth. 3 of the foundation's clients spoke about how the organization had helped them. A teacher cleared of student abuse allegations after a thorough investigation, a business owner exonerated of fraud charges, a single mother who'd regained custody of her children after proving domestic violence accusations were fabricated. Listening to their stories, Arya felt something shift. Her nightmare had become something useful. Her suffering had been transformed into support for others facing similar battles. It didn't erase what she'd been through, but it gave it meaning beyond just her own survival. After the fundraiser, Noah found her standing alone on the balcony of the event space. "Good turnout," he said. "Better than I expected." Arya turned to face him. "Noah, can I tell you something?" "Always." A year ago, when this started, I wanted one thing, to prove I was innocent and destroy the people who framed me. Revenge and vindication, that was all I cared about. She looked out at the city. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being about that. It became about refusing to let them define me, about taking back control of my own story. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not fighting, when I'm not building an empire or defending my reputation or proving anything to anyone. She smiled slightly. It's harder than it sounds. Turns out I built my entire identity around achievement and success. Without that, I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be. You're Arya Bennett. You're someone who fights for what's right, who doesn't give up when things get hard, who turns her worst experiences into help for other people. Noah moved to stand beside her. That's not nothing. That's actually pretty remarkable. You have to say that. I'm your business partner. I don't have to say anything, but I'm saying it because it's true. He hesitated, then added, and because somewhere in the past year you became one of my closest friends. I care about you, Arya. Not as a client or a colleague, but as a person. And I want you to know that who you are now, without the empire and the titles and the achievements, that person is enough. More than enough. Arya felt tears threatening and blinked them back. Thank you. For everything. For believing in me, for standing by me, for not giving up when things looked hopeless. Thank you for trusting me, for letting me be part of your fight. Noah smiled. We make a good team. We do. They stood together on the balcony watching the city lights, and Arya realized this was what moving forward looked like. Not forgetting what happened, not pretending the trauma didn't exist, but building a life alongside it. A life defined by choices instead of circumstances, by values instead of revenge, by connection instead of empire. Spring came to Chicago with the kind of gentle warmth that felt like a promise. Arya celebrated her 1-year anniversary of exoneration quietly, with Noah and Jake and Patricia and a few close friends. No press, no speeches, just people who'd stood by her sharing a meal and remembering how far she'd come. The consulting practice was thriving in its modest way. They'd taken on a dozen clients, helped several organizations avoid financial crisis, and built a reputation for integrity and competence. Noah had proven to be an excellent partner, detail-oriented where Arya was big picture, patient where she was driven, content with slow growth where she still sometimes itched to scale. The foundation had helped 43 people facing false accusations. Not all of them had been exonerated. Some cases were genuinely ambiguous. Some people really were guilty despite their claims. But every client received thorough investigation and competent legal support. The difference between their outcomes and what might have happened without help was measurable and meaningful. Arya had also started therapy, working through the trauma of the past year with a psychologist who specialized in victims of corporate crime and public persecution. It was slow, difficult work, excavating wounds she'd tried to ignore while focusing on survival and rebuilding. But it helped. Slowly, incrementally, it helped. One afternoon in May, she got a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, still cautious after everything, but something made her pick up. Ms. Bennett, this is James Morrison from Bennett Industries. James, how are you? I'm good. Better than good, actually. I got a new job. Head of facilities at a tech company downtown. Better pay, better benefits, actual respect for what I do. He paused. I wanted to thank you for not throwing me under the bus when the FBI investigated the break-in. You could have told them I helped, saved yourself some trouble, but you didn't. You helped me when no one else would. I wasn't going to betray that. Well, I appreciate it. And I wanted you to know, Bennett Industries is falling apart. After Richard's arrest and your departure, half the board resigned. Major clients left. The company's being sold off in pieces. Everything you built is being dismantled. Arya felt a complicated mix of emotions. Sadness for the waste of it, vindication that they couldn't succeed without her, and underneath it all, a strange sense of relief. How do you feel about that? James asked. I feel like it was never really mine to begin with. I thought I built it, but Richard showed me that power and success are just illusions. The only things that are really yours are the relationships you build and the person you choose to be. She smiled. So honestly, I feel free. Let them tear it down. I've moved on. After the call ended, Arya sat at her desk and realized she meant it. Bennett Industries didn't define her anymore. Its rise and fall were just chapters in a story that had moved beyond them. That evening, she and Noah took Jake to the park near the office. They pushed him on the swings, helped him navigate the climbing structure, and watched him make friends with other kids with the easy confidence children had before the world taught them to be cautious. He's a great kid, Arya said, watching Jake negotiate sharing the slide with a little girl half his size. He is. Even though I take no credit for that, he came out of the womb with more emotional intelligence than I'll ever have. Noah grinned. But I'm doing my best not to screw him up too badly. I think you're doing better than just not screwing him up. Thanks. Noah was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? Do you ever regret it? Building Bennett Industries, I mean? Investing all those years in something that fell apart. Arya thought about it carefully. I regret trusting the wrong people. I regret not seeing the warning signs with Richard and Martin. But I don't regret the work itself. I learned things building that company, about leadership, about resilience, about what I'm capable of when I'm pushed to my limits. Those lessons matter, even if the company doesn't exist anymore. That's a healthy perspective. It took a lot of therapy to get there, she laughed. 6 months ago, I would have said yes, I regret all of it. It was a waste of my life. But now I can see that the experience shaped me, made me who I am. And I actually like who I am now better than who I was then. The Arya Bennett who ran Bennett Industries wouldn't have started a foundation for the wrongly accused. No. She would have been too busy building her empire to notice people who needed help. Arya watched Jake jump off the swing, landing with a whoop of triumph. That version of me was so focused on success that I forgot what success was supposed to be for. I thought it was about proving myself, about being the best, about winning. But it's not. It's about making life better for people, about using whatever skills and resources you have to reduce suffering and increase joy. When did you get so wise? When I lost everything and had to figure out what actually mattered. She turned to look at him. Noah, I need to tell you something. You've become really important to me, not just as a business partner, but as a friend, as someone I trust and rely on. And I know things are complicated. You have Jake, you're still navigating co-parenting with your ex, I'm still putting my life back together, but I wanted you to know that this, what we've built together, it matters to me. You matter to me. Noah met her eyes, and something passed between them that felt significant and fragile at the same time. You matter to me too, he said quietly. More than I probably should admit, given that we work together, and I don't want to make things weird. But Arya, you're one of the best people I know. You've been through hell, and instead of becoming bitter or cynical, you've become more compassionate. That's rare. That's special. So what do we do about it? I don't know. Figure it out as we go, I guess. Noah smiled. We're pretty good at navigating complicated situations together. Maybe this is just another one. Jake ran over, demanding they watch him do a trick on the monkey bars. They followed him to the equipment and cheered enthusiastically as he swung from bar to bar, his face bright with pride. Arya watched Noah with his son, patient, attentive, fully present, and felt something warm settle in her chest. Whatever this was between them, it could wait. They had time. For the first time in a year, she actually believed she had time to let things develop naturally instead of forcing outcomes. As summer approached, the practice landed its biggest client yet, a regional nonprofit network that needed comprehensive financial restructuring. It was exactly the kind of project Arya would have dismissed as too small during her Bennett Industries days. Now she saw it as an opportunity to help dozens of organizations serve their communities more effectively. She and Noah worked closely on the project, often late into the evening, talking through strategies and debating approaches. Their working relationship had evolved into something easy and collaborative, each anticipating what the other needed, disagreeing productively, celebrating wins together. One night, after they'd finally cracked a particularly stubborn budget problem, Noah looked up from his laptop and said, "I'm really glad you came into my life, even though it started with fraud and conspiracy and federal manhunts." "Especially because it started that way," Arya corrected. "Normal people don't build the kind of trust we have. We got there by surviving impossible situations together." "True. Although I could have done without the death threats and the arrests warrants." "Details," she smiled. "But seriously, Noah, I don't know how I would have survived this past year without you. You believed me when no one else did. You risked everything to help me. That's not something I'll ever forget. You would have done the same for someone in your position." "Maybe. But you actually did it. That makes all the difference." They packed up their materials and walked out together into the warm summer night. The city felt different now than it had a year ago. Less threatening, more full of possibility. Arya had learned to see it not as a place where her life had fallen apart, but as a place where she'd fought back and won. As they reached Noah's car, he turned to her. "Do you ever think about what's next? After this practice? After the foundation is established? After everything settles into routine? Sometimes, but I'm trying not to plan too far ahead. I spent too many years living for future achievements instead of present moments." She looked up at the stars, barely visible through the city lights. "Right now, I'm just trying to be here, to appreciate what I have instead of always chasing what's next." "That's probably healthy." "Probably, although it drives my therapist crazy that I can't articulate long-term goals anymore." Arya laughed. Apparently, survive and try to be a decent person isn't a sufficient life plan. "Sounds like a solid plan to me." They said goodnight, and Arya walked to her own car feeling content in a way that still surprised her. She'd lost her company, her reputation, months of her life to fear and survival. But she'd gained perspective, compassion, and relationships built on authenticity rather than professional networking. The trade felt worth it. A year and a half after the press conference that cleared her name, Arya stood in the same park where she'd confronted Martin. She'd come here deliberately, wanting to face the memory of that night and prove to herself that it no longer had power over her. The park looked different in daylight, peaceful, ordinary, just another Chicago green space where people walked dogs and kids played. Nothing remained of the terror she'd felt, the desperation, the sense that everything was collapsing. She'd survived. Not just survived, she'd rebuilt. And what she'd rebuilt was better than what she'd lost because it was built on truth instead of ambition, on values instead of validation. Her phone rang. Noah's number. "Hey," she answered. "What's up?" "Are you sitting down?" "I'm standing in a park. Why?" "Because I have news. The tech startup I've been investigating, the one we thought might be committing securities fraud, they just got raided by the FBI. Apparently someone tipped off federal investigators about their accounting irregularities. Someone with forensic accounting expertise and a track record of exposing corporate fraud." Arya smiled. "You did that. We did that. Your instinct that something was wrong, my analysis that proved it, our report that we sent to the FBI. We just saved investors millions of dollars and prevented another Bennett Industries situation. We're getting good at this." "We are. Which is why I think we should expand, not to TWUM, not huge, not Bennett Industries huge, but maybe hire a junior analyst, take on a few more complex cases, really lean into this corporate fraud prevention thing." Arya thought about it. The old her would have immediately started planning aggressive growth, hiring sprees, market domination. The new her considered carefully whether expansion aligned with their values and quality of life. "Let's talk about it," she said. "Figure out what sustainable growth looks like without sacrificing what makes this work good." "Deal." Also, completely separate topic. Jake wants to know if you're coming to his birthday party next month. Apparently you're his favorite grown-up besides his parents. "I'm honored. Tell him I wouldn't miss it." After the call ended, Arya stood in the park a while longer, thinking about the past year and a half, about betrayal and vindication, about loss and rebuilding, about how the worst experiences could sometimes lead to the best outcomes if you refuse to let them define you. She thought about Richard Carmichael in prison, about Martin serving his sentence, about the board members who'd abandoned her so quickly. She felt no hatred for them anymore. Just a distant sadness that people could be so weak, so willing to believe the worst, so quick to sacrifice others to protect themselves. She thought about Noah and Jake, about Patricia and James and Rebecca, and all the people who'd taken risks to help her, about the foundation clients who'd been given second chances, about the small consulting practice that was doing meaningful work without consuming her entire life. This wasn't the success story she'd imagined when she founded Bennett Industries. It was smaller, quieter, less impressive on paper, but it was hers in a way that Empire had never been. It was built on trust instead of transactions, on impact instead of income, on relationships that would survive crisis instead of crumbling the moment things got difficult. Arya left the park and walked back to her car, feeling the weight of the past year and a half settle into something manageable. The trauma would always be part of her story, but it didn't have to be the whole story. She could acknowledge what she'd survived without letting it consume who she was becoming. As she drove through the city toward the office, toward the life she'd built from the ashes of the one that had been destroyed, Arya realized she'd finally found the answer to the question that had haunted her in those first terrible weeks. Who was she when everything was stripped away? The company, the reputation, the success, the power. She was someone who fought for truth, someone who refused to give up even when defeat seemed certain, someone who could survive betrayal and come out stronger on the other side, someone who turned suffering into service, who built relationships on authenticity, who measured success by impact instead of income. She was enough, just as she was, without the empire, without the titles, without the validation of others. And that finally felt like victory.